Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of the Harvey family. Brian Taba Harvey, 49, was a local icon who rose to fame in the 1980s as the lead singer and songwriter of the indie band House of Freaks. Although he and his musical partner Johnny Hott went their separate ways professionally in the 1990s, they remained close friends. A dedicated musician, Brian performed on stage for the final time on New Year's Eve, unaware that it would be the last night of his life. On the other hand, Catherine Gravinsky, 39, found success as co-owner of World of Mirth, a popular toy store in Richmond's Carytown district. She was an artist who pursued various endeavors, including painting sets for community theater, working as a pastry chef, and waitressing. Catherine had an older sister, Shelley Gravinsky, and was also the half-sister of actor Stephen Culp, known for his roles in TV shows such as The West Wing and Desperate Housewives, as well as various films. Brian and Catherine's paths crossed at the Border Cafe on Main Street, where Catherine worked and Brian frequently visited with Johnny. In 1990, Brian and Catherine got married. The House of Freaks then released an album featuring a song called I Got Happy, which was dedicated to Catherine. The couple had 2 daughters. Their first daughter, Stella, was born in 1996. After becoming a father, Brian realized that having children helped him find meaning in life and the importance of keeping hope for his children's future. Their second daughter, Ruby, was born in 2001. While working in the computer department of the Henrico County school system, Brian continued to pursue his passion for music. Meanwhile, Catherine started her own business, opening a unique toy and gift store called World of Mirth in the Carytown neighborhood. The store was designed to be a welcoming space for parents and children to spend time together, and children are free to play with the available toys. Brian Harvey's family lives in a quiet, quaint neighborhood south of Richmond. Their 2-story red brick house was surrounded by large trees, porch swings, and ivy-covered gardens. They had a cozy family room in the basement. The family was well respected and loved in the community, and it seemed no one had any ill will towards them. On New Year's Day, 2006, Brian, his wife Catherine, and their 2 daughters, Stella and Ruby, were preparing for a busy day. They were hosting a barbecue lunch for friends and family, a tradition they enjoyed every year on this day. They woke up early to get everything ready. That Sunday morning, Brian went outside to collect the newspaper, absorbed in the front page news. He didn't lock the door when he came back in, which wasn't unusual for them, especially on party days when friends would be arriving. The neighborhood was considered safe, so they didn't think much of it. However, on that day, Brian was unaware that some criminals were secretly lurking nearby. Catherine was busy in the kitchen, preparing cookies for the guests who were expected to arrive soon. Suddenly, she heard voices coming from the living room and thought that some guests had arrived early. But when she went to check, she was shocked to see 2 strangers instead of familiar faces. Later, Brian, Catherine, and their young daughter Ruby were ordered to go downstairs to the basement playroom. Stella, who had spent the night at a friend's house, had not yet arrived home. Once the family was in the small room, the intruders used electrical cords and packing tape to tie them up. The intruders told them that as long as they cooperated, no one would get hurt while they searched the house. Just as the intruders were starting to ransack the house, someone knocked on the front door at around 10 a.m. The leader of the intruders untied Catherine and told her to answer the door. However, he warned her that if she tried to escape or ask for help, her daughter and husband would be killed. Catherine was in a difficult situation. Stella was about to arrive, and if she answered the door, she would put her daughter in danger. On the other hand, if she didn't answer the door, the intruder might get angry and hurt her family. In the end, Catherine decided that it was best to cooperate, so she opened the door. Stella suddenly ran past Catherine and into the playroom, where the family usually spent a lot of time together. Catherine quickly intervened, stopping Stella's friend from following her. Kyron Perkinson, the friend's mother, later expressed her surprise at Catherine's unusual behavior. When Perkinson asked Catherine how she was feeling, Catherine said she was not well. Then, she made a circular motion with her hand, mimicking a gun and pointing it at her head. This abruptly ended the conversation, and Catherine shut the door. This strange gesture would later trouble Perkinson, wondered if Catherine was trying to convey something. She wondered if Catherine being monitored by the intruders. Perkinson left, intending to return later for a party. All 4 members of the Harvey family were now inside the house. Catherine went back to the basement and found Stella had been securely tied up alongside the rest of the family. Everyone was caught helpless and defenseless. Chaos broke out unexpectedly and without any prior indication. The assailant revealed a knife taken from the Harveys' kitchen and began slashing the family members' throats. Angry that he had to wait so long for them to die, he ordered his accomplices to hit them hard on the head. However, the accomplice refused. The assailant then grabbed a claw hammer and ruthlessly struck the family members repeatedly until they stopped moving. After removing Catherine Harvey's wedding ring, the assailants set the room on fire using wine as an accelerant to conceal evidence of their crimes. As they escaped from the scene, they ate a plate of freshly baked cookies from the kitchen counter and stole a laptop, DVD player, and other items. They rushed out and entered the getaway vehicle parked outside, where a woman was waiting. She was related to one of the robbers and had been on lookout duty during the incident. They quickly departed, leaving the scene as quietly as they had arrived. Later that day, around 1:30 p.m., Johnny arrived at the celebratory gathering. Upon opening the front door, he was met with a thick cloud of smoke and a strong burning smell. Alarmed, he alerted the neighbors. They quickly called 911. Firefighters arrived at the scene and put out the fire. However, they soon discovered 4 bodies in the smoldering basement. Despite initial appearances, investigators determined that the fire did not cause the deaths. Instead, they found evidence of a more sinister cause. The investigation was now treating the incident as a murder case. The scene was so heartbreaking that it left even the police and medical staff, who were accustomed to dealing with traumatic situations, utterly stunned and shocked. Some were even seen crying openly. The discovery that parents were made to watch their children being brutally killed, and that children were also forced to witness the brutal deaths of their parents, was especially devastating. Autopsies revealed that Brian and Catherine died from blunt force trauma to the head. Stella's death was caused by a combination of blunt force trauma and smoke inhalation, suggesting she was still alive when the fire started. Ruby's cause of death was stab wounds to the neck and back, resulting in her death. The authorities immediately launched an investigation into the murders, but they had little evidence to work with. To gather more information, they appealed to the public for assistance. This approach proved successful when, on January 6, a woman named Latoya P.Y. contacted the police, requesting a welfare check on her friend, 21 years old Ashley Basil Tucker. Latoya expressed concerns that Ashley's boyfriend, 29 years old Ree Joseph Dandridge, and his uncle, 29 years old Ricky Javon Gray, were involved in the Harvey family's murder. Gray, who was slightly younger than his nephew by a few months, was reportedly the one in charge. The investigation took a significant turn when Latoya revealed that the 2 men had hidden evidence of their crimes at her residence. She disclosed that Gray and Dandridge had recently visited her home with a laptop that had an image of the Harvey family as its wallpaper. Given the extensive news coverage of the Harvey case, it was clear that the laptop belonged to the family. Latoya revealed information about the plan that Ashley, Gray and Dandridge had devised to rob Ashley's parents. According to the plan, Ashley would pretend to be a hostage, allowing Dandridge and Gray to extort money from the Percyle Tucker, Ashley's stepfather. This would make Ashley appear innocent, even though LaToya knew about the plan and was offered a role in it. However, LaToya became suspicious of the group and declined to participate. Later, when LaToya asked Gray and Dandridge about Ashley's whereabouts, they gave a cryptic response, saying, "Ashley has gone bye-bye." This increased LaToya's concerns, and she contacted the police. The information she provided was crucial in helping investigators connect the dots. When investigators arrived at the residence where Ashley lived with her mother, Mary Baskerville Tucker, and stepfather, Percyle Tucker, they found a gruesome scene. Inside the home, they discovered the lifeless bodies of all three victims, who had been subjected to a brutal and violent death, similar to the Harvey family. The victims were bound, gagged, and had their throats slit. Duct tape was wrapped tightly around their heads, causing additional suffering. Mary and Percyle had deep neck lacerations, and Percyle had a sock inserted into his throat. Ashley was found to have been suffocated with a plastic bag. The cause of death for all three victims was determined to be suffocation and torture. The police believed that the killer's primary motivation was a thrill-seeking desire, rather than any obvious personal benefit, so they worked together to catch them before they could hurt anyone else. Similar to the Harveys, Percyle and Mary live a quiet life with no known enemies. Percy works as a forklift driver, while Mary works for a cleaning service company. Their peaceful life was shattered by their daughter's betrayal, leading to the tragic death of a couple enjoying their golden years. Investigators quickly discovered a crucial connection between the Harvey family's case and the Tucker family's case. Ashley was found wearing Catherine's wedding band, which had been missing and taken from Catherine. With this revelation, urgent action was necessary to apprehend Gray and Dandridge before they could inflict further harm. Authorities tracked Gray and Dandridge back to their home state of Pennsylvania and apprehended them in Philadelphia on January 7. Dandridge claimed that Gray planned the murders and he just followed orders. When faced with these accusations, Gray provided explicit and disturbing details of the two family massacres, explaining that financial gain was the primary motivation behind their actions. Notably, during the Harvey family murders, he was under the influence of an illicit substance called PCP, also known as phencyclidine or angel dust. This potent drug is known to cause auditory and visual hallucinations and often leads to aggressive behavior. During his confession, Gray showed no emotion, maintaining a chilling stare. His indifference to the lives he took led investigators to view him as a ruthless and heartless individual. Additionally, it was discovered that Gray was responsible for the murder of his wife, Trevor Terrell Gray, whose body was found in a shallow grave in Washington, Pennsylvania. The couple, married for 6 months, lived together in a house owned by Trevor's family. They shared the home with Gray's nephew, Dandridge. Trevor's parents reported that the couple frequently had intense arguments. On the day Trevor's body was discovered, Gray had claw marks on his forearm. Initially, neither Gray nor Dandridge were considered suspects by the Washington police. Trevor's mother, Manna Squires, claimed that the police thought Trevor's death was due to a drug overdose, which led to a slow investigation. Trevor's death initially raised suspicions, but a thorough investigation did not occur until Gray confessed to the crime in 2006. On December 31, 2005, a violent assault occurred outside a home in Arlington. Two men, later identified as Gray and Dandridge, attacked 26-year-old Ryan Key in front of his parents' house. The assault left Ryan with severe injuries, including stab wounds to the chest, neck, and arms. He spent 2 weeks in a coma due to the near-fatal attack. Additionally, he permanently lost the use of his right arm. Gray and Dandridge faced multiple charges related of the Tucker's family killings. Gray was charged with 5 counts of capital murder, while Dandridge faced 3 counts of murder. Despite initially admitting to their involvement, Both men pleaded not guilty. Gray's 6-month trial concluded with a guilty verdict on all counts. He received a life sentence for the murders of Brian and Catherine Harvey. The court also sentenced him to death for the brutal murders of Stella and Ruby. Following Gray's conviction in September 2006, Dandridge chose to accept a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in December 2006. Gray also faced charges in Culpeper County for the murder of Cheryl Warner, a 37-year-old mother of 3 who was found shot and hanged in her burning home. Gray pleaded not guilty, but the charge was later suspended due to conflicting evidence on June 4, 2008. Over the next 9 years, Gray's lawyers filed multiple appeals. They argued that Gray's traumatic childhood had affected his mental capacity. However, the Supreme Court rejected his case in 2016. As a result, Gray was scheduled to be executed on January 18, 2017. On the scheduled date, with all appeals exhausted, Gray was put to death by lethal injection at Greensville Correctional Center. Meanwhile, Dandridge remains in prison at Sussex 2 State Prison. The Harvey family's brutal murders sent shockwaves of horror and grief through the community. Over 1,400 people attended their memorial service, expressing condolences and sorrow outside Catherine's store. Flowers, dolls, and candles formed a poignant tribute along the curb outside the red brick house. The candles, lit by children, remained glowing for weeks. Catherine's brother Culp described the murders as a devastating blow that felt endless. He spoke about the pain of thinking about the family's final hours, saying that everyone was trying to move forward. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Anna Repkina. On April 17, 2017, a caretaker named Russell found a dead body in the Oregon forest. The woman was Anna Repkina, a Russian native who had been shot in the head and had various trash around her body. Russell reported the discovery to the police. Anna Alexieva Repkina, from Chelyabinsk, Russia, came from a respectable family. She was intelligent, hardworking, and had a passion for travel, rock music, cats, and capturing memories through photography. Anna valued love and longed to be loved in return. She aspired to get married, have children, and build a family home. Those who knew her still cherished the memory of her infectious sense of humor, which made her a joy to be around. In 2016, Anna's 7-year relationship with her high school sweetheart came to an end, leaving her heartbroken. However, she refused to give up on her dreams of finding true love. With online dating becoming increasingly popular, Anna decided to take a chance and signed up for several websites. It was on a Russian dating site that she matched with someone who seemed to fit her ideal perfectly. His name was William Hargrove, a 26-year-old from Oregon who worked as a bouncer and mechanic. Interestingly, William had a strong affinity for Russian culture, and he claimed to have fallen for Anna as well. William treated Anna with kindness, frequently praising her. Despite being physically distant, he made an effort to be emotionally present when she needed him. His friends described him as a charismatic, passionate, and likable individual with a great sense of humor. He was a driven person who inspired those around him to pursue their goals. According to his former roommate, William had a remarkable ability to talk his way in or out of any situation. Anna and William communicated daily, and their online relationship rapidly became serious over a few months. They seemed destined to be together, sharing a deep connection. Their common interests, such as enjoying live music and having a similar sense of humor, made them a perfect match, as observed by their friends. Anna and William were very compatible. William was extremely sweet. Despite being separated by continents, he would frequently send her flowers. Soon, they started discussing meeting in person. In December 2016, they decided to take their months-old relationship to the next level. Anna booked a flight to Oregon to see William. However, Anna made a mistake on her first attempt. She accidentally booked a ticket for Portland, Maine, instead of Portland, Oregon. By the time she realized her error, she had already flown to Maine. Still, she was determined to spend the Christmas holidays with her boyfriend. She corrected her flight issues and arrived in Oregon on time. William picked her up from the airport. Anna and William shared 10 wonderful days together. He took her on guided tours, and they explored the seaside, played in the snow, and snuggled up by the fireplace. He introduced her to his friends, making their time together even more special. As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, they joyfully shouted, "Happy New Year," and shared a romantic kiss. For both of them, it was the perfect Christmas, and they both felt they were meant to be together. After Anna's 10-day visit came to an end, William proposed to her with his grandmother's emerald ring, and she happily accepted. From that moment on, the two were engaged. However, what Anna was unaware of was that William had been unfaithful to her. He had been secretly involved with Michelle Chavez, his 33-year-old landlady, who was already married with 2 children. William had been renting a room in Michelle's home, and their affair had been ongoing for over a year, even before Anna's visit. In reality, Anna had unknowingly met Michelle, who was posing as William's landlady, and was in fact William's romantic rival. Michelle was aware that her boyfriend William had brought his girlfriend Anna to her home. She didn't confront them, possibly thinking that William would never leave her or that Anna was insignificant, just like her own husband. Whatever her reason, she kept quiet. However, things became clearer when Michelle discovered the engagement ring. Anna, thrilled with the news, posted a picture of her ring on Facebook. The post appeared on Michelle's homepage, thanks to the algorithm. Michelle was furious, not just because William was engaged to another woman, but because she had planned to leave her husband for him. In a bold move, Michelle took off her wedding ring and handed it to William. The ring was identical to Anna's engagement ring. It was the same one William had recycled. Michelle expressed her anger to William, who repeatedly assured her that Anna meant nothing to him and that he would break off the engagement on March 1st, 2017. Meanwhile, Anna returned to Oregon, preparation in full swing. She had packed her wedding dress in a suitcase and had even resigned from her job, ready to start a new life with her fiancé, William. Michelle grew concerned about the seriousness of Anna and William's relationship, so she decided to intervene. One day, she reached out to Anna on Facebook and revealed everything that had been going on. Anna then reported back to William about the conversation with Michelle. However, William dismissed Michelle's concerns, attributing them to jealousy as his ex. Despite this, the couple was determined to move forward with their plans, ignoring Michelle's warnings. They proceeded to schedule their wedding for March 23rd, planning to exchange vows by the seaside. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, and they headed to the beach for the ceremony. However, the officiant failed to show up. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, they returned home, deciding to try again in April. William consistently made it clear to Anna that she was insignificant to him and that he didn't love her. However, Anna refused to accept this. Michelle grew tired of the situation and decided to intervene. On April 15th, Michelle gave William an ultimatum. He had to choose between her and Anna. He couldn't continue to lead both women on. Michelle also issued a stark warning. If Anna wasn't gone by April 20th, she would take drastic action. Building a snowman was a sinister euphemism for killing someone and hiding their body in a location where it would remain frozen and undiscovered. After Michelle clearly expressed her feelings to William, she was unable to reach him. She assumed he had chosen Anna over her. The next day, Sunday the 16th of April, Michelle left voicemails for William in an attempt to convey her emotions. However, William called Michelle to inform her that he was single again, having ended his relationship with Anna. The breakup was messy, but Anna was in the process of returning to Russia. As it happened, William's car had collided with a deer, leaving him stranded at the Ali Murtal store. He asked Michelle to meet him there, which she agreed to, despite being in the middle of a family gathering on Easter Sunday. Michelle left her family's house and drove to the store, where she and William reconnected. They celebrated their rekindled relationship by having sex in William's car on the 17th of April. Anna's body was discovered in the forest at the start of the investigation into her death. The investigators had no idea who she was, as there was no identification on her, and she had only been in the state for about a month. There was no sign of a murder weapon, only litter scattered around her. However, among the trash, a clear plastic bag caught their attention, containing a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a KFC chicken bag. The KFC receipt was the crucial piece of evidence, bearing a date, time, and debit card number. The debit card was traced back to Kevin Thomas, who was subsequently tracked down by the investigators. Kevin revealed that he and William had a weekly habit of getting lunch at KFC every Friday, and the receipt was from a purchase about a week before his questioning. Kevin had been the one to expose William's complicated romantic relationships. The investigation into Anna's death was the only reason William's infidelity had ever come to light. Kevin also recalled that William had borrowed his shotgun, claiming he wanted to go to the woods to blow off some steam. After obtaining Kevin's statement, the police shifted their focus to William and Michelle. William's behavior became increasingly suspicious, as he was caught on camera in stores where he had purchased cigars and Star Wars Legos. He even confided in Kevin that he was splurging on things he couldn't afford in an attempt to lift his spirits. On the 16th, William broke down in tears in the arms of a store employee, claiming his girlfriend had just dumped him. However, William had actually moved back in with Michelle, and when questioned by the police about his whereabouts on the 16th of April, he falsely stated that he had gone for a drive with Michelle. When asked about his relationship with Anna, William denied any romance, saying he had met her in Corvallis while out walking, went on 2 dates, but realized it wouldn't work out between them, which ended things between them. William said the last time he saw Anna was in mid-March. He also mentioned that Anna had mistakenly posted about their engagement on Facebook, which caused trouble for him with his actual partner, Michelle. William was questioned about trash near his late fiancée, Anna Rapina's body. He confessed to littering, but claimed he'd thrown KFC trash away 40 miles from the scene. Investigators were skeptical. When told his trash was found near another murder victim, William was shocked, then asked for a lawyer. He was arrested April 19th for Anna's murder. Michelle was questioned after William's arrest. Initially, she stuck to their rehearsed story, saying they spent the day together. However, under continued questioning, she admitted lying and gave a new account, claiming William was supposed to call and pick her up, but never did. Later, when Michelle was being questioned by the police, they told her that her boyfriend of a year and a half was being held in custody on suspicion of murder. Her response was a simple, "Okay." The investigator found this reaction suspicious and highlighted it, which caused Michelle's emotions to become visible. She started to whimper and attributed her initial lack of reaction to being in a state of shock. William Hargrove was facing trial in October 2019 for murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft, charges that were filed in June 2018. The prosecution sought to have William convicted on all counts, while the defense argued that he was innocent and that Melissa, his burnt lover, was the actual perpetrator. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence against William, highlighting his motive and guilt. It was revealed that William had a second lover, Michelle, who was pressuring him to choose between her and Anna. Furthermore, evidence showed that William had driven with Anna, and his cell phone records placed him near the scene of the crime on the day of her murder, at 4:30 p.m. on Logging Road. The shotgun used to kill Anna was found in William's car, with only his fingerprints on the weapon. Moreover, despite claiming to have no involvement in Anna's death, William was caught using her money to pay off his car insurance, make ATM withdrawals, and go shopping. The prosecution alleged that William had taken Anna to the forest, shot and killed her, and then used her money to pay off his debts, all because he was choosing between Anna and Michelle. The defense argued that their client was innocent and pointed to Melissa as the prime suspect. According to them, Melissa had motives to harm Anna, having previously threatened to build a snowman with her. Furthermore, Melissa's cell phone had been found on the logging road just weeks before Anna's murder, suggesting she had likely been in the area to plan the crime. When searched, Melissa's house yielded Anna's cell phone, which implicated her further. Despite this, Melissa was not charged with any crimes and was called as a witness for the prosecution. Melissa took the stand to testify about her relationships, including how she met William and the dynamics between them. As a late-night cab driver, she had met William at the bar where he worked. With her husband's knowledge and consent, she started an affair with William, which grew intense over time. Eventually, William even rented a room in her house to be closer to her. Both her marriage and her relationship with William were open, meaning they allowed each other to have outside relationships. When Anna first appeared, Melissa wasn't interested. However, by Anna's second visit, which seemed like it would be a long-term stay, Melissa was upset, particularly after seeing her own wedding ring on Anna's finger. Although Melissa had given William an ultimatum, she was not involved in his harming Anna. She claimed she never intended for Anna to get hurt or, worse, lose her life. Melissa continued to defend herself against the defense's allegations. The threat about building a snowman was a joke, albeit an extreme one, which was a family joke. Her cell phone was indeed found in the forest, but William had driven her there. She had no idea why he did so or what he was planning. Furthermore, William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned by the authorities. Melissa's testimony lasted for 14 hours. Besides Melissa, around 70 other people gave testimony, including Anna's mother, William's best friend and roommate, as well as some of Melissa's family members. In her hometown in Oregon, Melissa faced intense scrutiny, with locals criticizing and bullying her. At one point, she even attempted to take her own life, but fortunately, it was unsuccessful. Prosecutor praised Melissa's efforts, calling them tough, super tough. After a month of court appearances, the judge asked the jury to deliver a verdict. They deliberated for under 3 hours, finding no evidence linking Michelle to Anna's death, unlike William, and clearing her alibi. William maintained his not guilty plea, but the overwhelming evidence proved conclusive, and he was found guilty on all counts, receiving a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. His attorney, however, announced plans to file an appeal. The jurors in Anna's case developed a strong bond during the trial. After the verdict, they were escorted to the logging trail, the site where Anna's body was found, to pay their respects. Anna will be remembered as a brave young woman who left her Russian homeland to build a new life in the United States. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mike Williams. Mike Williams was born on October 16, 1969, in Bradfordville, north of Tallahassee. He was the son of a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. Family and friends called him Mike. Even though the family didn't have much money, and Mike, along with his older brother, grew up living in a trailer, those were happy times. The parents cared about their son's future, and instead of building a house, they set aside money for the education of both boys, who themselves worked part-time at night in supermarkets. Mike enrolled in North Florida Christian High School, where he excelled. He became student council president, played soccer, and was active in the Key Club. At the age of 15, Mike started duck hunting as a hobby and met Denise Merrill. Denise was a cheerleader and council secretary, and they began dating. Friends thought they were a great couple. While still in high school, Mike became best friends with Brian Winchester, whom Denise had introduced him to. Brian later had a friend, Katie Thomas, and the two couples remained friends for the rest of Mike's life. After high school, Mike and Denise attended Florida State University, where they both majored in political science and urban planning. The lovers graduated together. Denise became a public accountant, and Mike became a real estate appraiser. Mike proved himself to be a dedicated and hard-working individual, consistently putting in 15-hour days, which led to rapid success in his career. In 1994, he married Denise, and around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The four of them maintained a close and supportive relationship. Mike loved his wife deeply and was determined to provide for their family to the best of his ability. He had boundless energy and was a high achiever. By the age of 31, Mike Williams had achieved significant success as a real estate appraiser, earning a substantial annual income of nearly $200,000. This allowed the couple to purchase a comfortable home in an upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and in 1999, they welcomed a daughter into their family. Although Mike was prudent, he had a tendency to engage in risky activities, which prompted his friends to warn Denise about them. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike sought the advice of his trusted friend Brian, who worked as an insurance agent. Brian sold Mike 2 life insurance policies, one worth $250,000 and another worth $500, providing financial protection for his loved ones in the event of an unforeseen disaster. In 2000, Mike's father died, which had a profound impact on Mike. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike turned to his friend Brian for help. Brian assisted Mike in getting a $1 million life insurance policy, adding to an existing policy and bringing the total coverage to nearly $2 million, just 6 months before Mike vanished. On December 16, 2000, their 6th wedding anniversary, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. Denise and their daughter stayed at home, expecting Mike to return that day so they could celebrate their anniversary with a planned night out in Apalachicola, a small town on the bayou. However, Mike didn't come back, prompting Denise to become worried and call her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father drove to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but Mike was missing. The search for Mike began, and after a few hours, a helicopter pilot located the boat drifting approximately 225 feet away from the boat ramp. Notably, Mike's shotgun was still in its case on board, indicating that he was never able to use it. This discovery led to a shift in the operation from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. Locals familiar with the area informed the search team that the location was previously an orchard, known as Stump Field, due to the numerous stumps both above and below the water level, which made navigating motorized boats through the area hazardous. The search team formulated a theory about what might have happened to Mike. He might have collided with a stump while operating his boat, fallen into the water, and become trapped, with his boots filling with water and ultimately causing him to drown. Several agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, participated in the search for Mike. Although they made an extensive and systematic effort, they did not find any signs of him. After a week, the search operation shifted its focus to a body recovery effort. Search teams used probe poles to scan the lake bottom and brought in dogs to assist. 10 days into the search, volunteers found a camouflage-patterned hunting hat, but it could not be confirmed as belonging to Mike. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency suggested that Mike might have been attacked by alligators, which could explain why his body was never found, given the lake's known alligator population. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement did not find any evidence of a violent death and supported this theory. The search was finally called off after 5 weeks. The day after the authorities gave up searching for Mike, Denise put together a memorial service to pay tribute to him. While it appeared to everyone that Denise had come to terms with losing her husband, Mike's mother was still grappling with the loss. 6 months down the line, in June 2001, a fisherman stumbled upon a sinister find: a pair of boots bobbing on the lake's surface. This prompted a team of divers to scour the lake and they fished out a lightweight hunting jacket and flashlight from the depths. When they examined the jacket, they found a hunting license with Mike Williams' name and signature tucked away in one of its pockets. The discovery of the hunting jacket and boots raised many questions about Mike Williams' disappearance. The fact that neither item showed signs of an alligator attack and appeared to have been recently placed in the water rather than having been there for 6 months was suspicious. The boots, for example, were not slimy, and the flashlight still worked. Despite these inconsistencies, a week later, Denise's attorney requested that the court declare Mike Williams dead, citing the discovery of his belongings as evidence. The attorney suggested that alligators and other aquatic life had likely consumed his body whole. The court granted the motion, and the death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. However, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mother, refused to accept this conclusion and continued to search for her son. Her efforts caused tension with her former sister-in-law, Denise, who demanded that she stop searching and accept reality. Cheryl's persistence eventually led to a strained relationship between the two women, and Denise followed through on her threat. Undeterred, Cheryl spent the next 3 years fighting to have Mike's disappearance investigated. She made numerous phone calls, posted signs, wrote to the governor, compiled a book of evidence, and contacted reporters. Her persistence finally paid off when she convinced an alligator expert, Matthew Oresco, to get involved. Oresco explained that alligators don't feed during the cold winter months, and that there would always be forensic evidence left behind after an alligator kill. After 3 years, Cheryl Williams finally persuaded law enforcement to abandon the alligator attack theory and launch an official investigation into her son Mike's disappearance. The case was reopened based on newly uncovered facts about alligators' eating habits and evidence gathered from interviews and official data. Former investigator Ronnie Austin revealed that the general consensus among law enforcement agencies was that Mike's death was not accidental. Initially, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency took charge of the case, as Mike was considered a missing hunter. They spent 735 hours searching a 10-acre section of the lake for his body, but neglected to explore other possibilities. Subsequent investigations involved interviewing all those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene. He pointed out several suspicious circumstances. Mike rarely hunted alone. His truck was found in an undeveloped area, and the severe storm that night should have pushed the boat to the east shore, yet it was found on the west shore. Furthermore, the boat's motor was not running, despite being full of gasoline. If Mike had fallen out of the boat while driving, it would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of gas. Unfortunately, law enforcement realized too late that they were not dealing with a simple drowning. By then, the crime scene had already been compromised by numerous volunteers and searchers. A car that could have been a vital clue was taken by the family without proper verification, and potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester aroused the suspicion of investigators due to their sudden union. The fact that Winchester had divorced his wife Kathy and married Denise raised eyebrows. Further investigation revealed that Denise had received a substantial financial gain of nearly $2 million from her late husband's life insurance policy. Detectives discovered that Winchester was the one who had sold the policy to Mike. It was also peculiar that Denise, as Mike's wife, showed little interest in the investigation and actively tried to hinder Cheryl's efforts, even going so far as to forbid the grandmother from communicating with her granddaughter. When the newlywed couple was brought in for questioning, their statements failed to shed new light on the case. Brian provided an alibi, stating that he was 60 miles from the lake and at home in bed at the time of Mike's disappearance, which his ex-wife Kathy could corroborate. He claimed that he had intended to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning, but overslept. Denise's interrogation also yielded no new leads. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement revealed that Mike's disappearance was not accidental, and they suspect he was a victim of a crime. However, due to the lack of sufficient evidence, they are unable to bring charges. Despite this, Cheryl Williams persisted, and her efforts led to the Discovery Cable Channel featuring a story on Mike's disappearance and the subsequent investigations. By that time, Cheryl had become disenchanted with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, convinced that they were either incapable or uninterested in resolving the case. Starting in 2012, Mike's mother, Cheryl, began a campaign to push for a new investigator or special prosecutor in Mike's case. Over 9 years, she wrote a staggering 2,600 letters to Governor Rick Scott, pleading her case. Meanwhile, in 2012, Denise discovered that Brian was cheating on her, and they broke up. The following year, she filed for divorce. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, an appraisal of their former family home was scheduled, which would finally free them from their property disputes. This event marked a turning point in Mike's case. The breakup was acrimonious, with Brian refusing to accept the divorce and Denise refusing to continue the relationship. Their constant fighting was further complicated by the Williams investigation, which seemed to be mocking them. Brian continued to call Denise, but she stopped taking his calls. The stress was taking a toll on him. On August 5, 2016, the day of the scheduled real estate appraisal, Denise left her home to drive to her job at Florida State University. As she chatted with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing into the back seat of her car. To her shock, it was Winchester. Brian, who had been hiding in the back seat, pressed a loaded gun against Denise's ribs and ordered her to drive straight ahead. He claimed he was forced to take this drastic measure because she had stopped answering his calls. Denise attempted to placate Brian by agreeing with everything he said and promising to give him a chance to salvage their marriage. Naively, Brian believed her. Denise reassured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the car, taking with him the brown sheet, plastic sheeting, bleach sprayer, and tools. It became evident that Denise had narrowly escaped death. Denise promptly called emergency services, and Brian was swiftly arrested and charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida carrying a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. He was also charged with domestic violence and armed burglary. The court ruled to detain Brian without bail. Cheryl Williams, hopeful that this development would shed light on her son's disappearance case, expressed optimism. Denise told the New York Daily News that she thought Brian was motivated by their wealth and prayed that he would reveal the truth. In a surprising turn of events, Brian cooperated, negotiating a lenient deal with the prosecutor and avoiding a life sentence. Brian began his confession by saying that initially, their marriage was going well, but he was a bad husband. He discovered a note in his first wife Kathy's purse, revealing her infidelity, and he sought revenge. They regularly socialized with Denise and Mike, going to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but it wasn't until his girlfriend Kathy cheated on him that he started viewing Denise in a romantic light. The affair between Brian and Denise started in October 1997. What began as a drunken one-night stand at a rock concert soon turned into frequent secret trysts. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever possible. Brian didn't want to divorce Kathy, but Denise made it clear she wouldn't leave her husband. She cared deeply about public opinion and didn't want to risk losing custody of her daughter. Over time, their affair evolved beyond casual sex. Denise and Brian saw themselves as a couple, exchanging gifts and love letters. It became apparent they couldn't continue like this. They couldn't bear to be apart. But divorce was off the table for Denise. Her reputation as a pious person had to remain intact. Then, Mike nearly died in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. Denise saw an opportunity to escape her predicament. After making a deal with the prosecutor, Brian will disclose that the year 2000 sparked discussions about Mike and Kathy's death. According to Brian, Denise had wanted to deflect responsibility, placing the blame solely on him and not herself. She had preferred a scenario in which their deaths would be viewed as an accident rather than a murder, thereby allowing her to convince herself that their fate was in God's hands, which would enable her to live with the consequences. After considering various options, Brian and Denise chose to stage a boating accident. They planned the murder to coincide with the maximum payout on Mike's life insurance policy, which was set to expire at the end of December 2000. The plan was in place. Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip, claiming he'd found an ideal spot on Lake Semol's shores. Mike thought he'd be back home by noon to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. Brian told him to bring his wading boots, as they were essential for the trip. Unbeknownst to Mike, Brian had a sinister motive. If he fell overboard wearing wading boots, he'd supposedly drown quickly. The plan was to make Mike's death appear as an accidental drowning. Once they were in the water, Brian pushed Mike out of the boat. However, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and started wading through the water towards the shore. Brian panicked, not knowing how to react. Mike began shouting for help, and Brian, desperate and confused, grabbed a shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking of the consequences. Brian's plan had unraveled, and he had to cover his tracks. Time was running out. He should have been home by now, getting ready to go hunting with his father-in-law. Since no one knew he was at the lake with Mike, Brian decided to drive home and pretend he'd overslept. He hoped Kathy would still be asleep. Brian entered the house as quietly as possible. Kathy was asleep, and his phone was on the floor. He went to bed, then called his father-in-law to apologize. Next, Brian created an alibi for himself before hiding the body. Denise was unaware that Brian had shot Mike in the head and buried him. Brian tried to confess, but Denise didn't want to hear it. For her, it was enough that her husband was gone. She preferred to believe that God had prevented Mike from swimming out and let him drown, as Brian had suggested. They promised each other to keep the secret. Denise and Brian rationalized the killing, claiming that Mike's presence made it impossible for them to live together. They downplayed the role of money, saying it was just an added bonus. Brian testified in court that investigators had discovered he had planted a hat, boots, flashlight, and license as part of a ruse. His aim was twofold. First, to deter searchers from abandoning the lake, and later, to provide justification for declaring Mike dead, thereby allowing Denise to collect insurance benefits. Impressively, they managed to expedite the typically 5-year recognition process to just 7 months, securing not only Social Security benefits, but also other advantages. As a result, Denise received approximately $2 million on May 8, 2018. Denise Williams faced charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and being an accessory to a felony, all of which carried a life sentence. Despite pleading not guilty to all 3 charges, Denise was sentenced to life imprisonment in February 2019. 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter Ansley inherited all of her late father's assets and the insurance money that had been owed to Denise. Denise Williams appealed her conviction and life sentence. Her attorney argued before Florida's First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence to implicate her in the actual murder. In November 2020, the murder conviction was overturned, although the 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld. Denise is currently being held at the Florida Women's Reception Center and will be 78 years old upon her release. Brian Winchester is currently serving the remainder of his sentence at Madison Correctional Institute in Florida, with a scheduled release date of July 30th, 2036, at which point he will be 67 years old. Ansley, the daughter of Mike and Denise, firmly believes her mother is innocent and attributes responsibility to Brian Winchester. While refusing to discuss the case or her personal life with the media, Ansley remains estranged from her uncle, Nick, and grandmother, Cheryl, who are distressed by their inability to connect with her. Cheryl deeply regrets having lost both her son and her granddaughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Channing Christian. Hugh Christopher Newson Jr., commonly known as Chris, was born on September 21, 1983, in Knoxville, Tennessee, to Mary and Hugh Newson, who raised him in a loving and large family. As the youngest child, he was deeply adored by his family members. During his youth, Chris showcased exceptional athletic abilities, particularly excelling in baseball throughout his school years. His coach firmly believed that he had a promising future in the sport, but a severe injury and the subsequent prolonged recovery process, unfortunately, ended his athletic career. Despite this setback, Chris possessed a multitude of talents. He was an skilled artist, a proficient guitar player, had impressive woodworking skills, and possessed in-depth knowledge about cars and motorcycles, having dreamed of becoming a mechanic during his youth. Following high school, Chris's passion for carpentry took center stage, leading him to attend the prestigious University of Tennessee, where he proved to be a diligent student, consistently ranking among the top of his class. Channing Christian was born on April 29, 1985, in Nacogdoches, Texas, to Dina and Gary Christian, the younger of their two children. She grew up with her older brother Chase, with whom she had a close and loving relationship. What made their birth even more special was that their mother, Dina, had been diagnosed with infertility in her younger years, making the arrival of her two children a remarkable blessing. In 1997, the Christian family relocated to Knoxville, Tennessee, where the children attended local schools and their parents started a thriving family business. Dina worked from home, conducting individual psychotherapy sessions, while Channing, who shared her mother's passion for psychology, was an outgoing and kind-hearted individual. After high school, Channing went on to study sociology at the University of Tennessee and worked part-time to save up for her dream car. On her 21st birthday, her parents and brother helped make her dream a reality by contributing towards the purchase of a silver Toyota 4Runner. In the same month, Channing and Christopher were invited to a mutual friend's birthday party. Channing visited a beauty salon to prepare for the celebration and parked her car in a nearby underground garage where they had planned to meet. However, Christopher was delayed, leading to a brief argument between them as they were running late for the event. As they failed to show up at the party, their friends became increasingly worried, knowing that it was unlike them to miss an event without notification. Attempts to reach them on their phones were unsuccessful. Channing's friend called her mom repeatedly, getting no response. The next morning, Dina noticed Channing hadn't come home. At first, she thought Channing might have stayed at Chris's after the party or gone to work from there. But when she saw missed calls from an unknown number, her concern grew. The caller said Channing and Chris never showed up to the party and weren't answering their phones. Dina feared the worst, and Chris's parents were equally worried, thinking he was at Channing's. Channing's parents grew anxious when they found out she, like Chris, had missed work. They contacted police, but the officer was unhelpful, suggesting the couple just wanted alone time. The parents took matters into their own hands, launching a search effort with friends, contacting acquaintances, visiting hospitals, and spreading the word on social media. Despite their efforts, no useful leads emerged. Channing was last seen at a beauty salon on Saturday, chatting about an upcoming party. It wasn't until Monday, January 8th, that the police officially launched their investigation into the disappearance of Channing Christian and Christopher Newson. By then, thanks to the tireless efforts of their parents and friends, the entire city was aware of the missing couple. The previous day, rumors had begun circulating about a disturbing discovery near the railroad tracks, although no concrete details were available. A railroad worker, while inspecting the tracks in his designated area, discovered badly damaged human remains on the embankment beside the tracks. The body was in a gruesome state, with multiple injuries, and had been drenched in a flammable liquid in an attempt to set it on fire. Upon responding to the scene, the police cordoned off the area and conducted a meticulous examination, but were unable to find any significant clues or leads. After taking necessary photographs, the remains were sent to the morgue for an autopsy to establish the cause of death and attempt to identify the victim, although it was clear that the extensive damage and effects of the fire would make this challenging. Forensic experts determined that the body belonged to a young man who had suffered a brutal and prolonged death. The victim had sustained multiple injuries while still alive, indicating a severe and lengthy assault. Almost all of his teeth had been knocked out or damaged by blows, and he had been shot 3 times, twice in the back and a final fatal shot to the head. Furthermore, traces of seminal fluid from at least 3 different men were found in his body, along with distinctive tears suggesting repeated violent assaults. When police reviewed recent reports of missing young men, they found that Christopher Newson matched the description in terms of age, height, and build. The officers then contacted his parents and asked for DNA samples to confirm the identity, while strongly advising them against viewing the body at the morgue due to its badly burned and unrecognizable state. Unfortunately, the DNA analysis subsequently confirmed that the body was indeed that of the missing student, Christopher Newson. The search for Channon continued, despite the distressing news about Christopher. Channon Christian's parents were still holding on to the hope that their daughter was alive, possibly being held captive somewhere. The last known location of her mobile phone was in one of Knoxville's more troubled neighborhoods on the day the couple disappeared, which suggested that they might have been taken there against their will. This led the parents to believe that Channon might still be being held in that area. In a secluded alley of this neighborhood, Channon's Toyota 4Runner was discovered abandoned and in a terrible state. The SUV was dirty, scratched, and had broken headlights and deflated tires. Additionally, all of Channon's personal belongings were missing, and the car was littered with cigarette butts. The seats were torn and stained, and the driver's seat was pushed far back, indicating that a large adult male had last driven the vehicle. A crumpled envelope with the address 2316 Chipman Street was found on the floor between the seats, likely dropped by the perpetrator. A local witness reported seeing 4 African-American males driving the SUV that Saturday evening, which stood out in that area. The fingerprints on the envelope led the police to Lamas Davidson, a man with prior convictions for serious offenses. His residence, located in an industrial area near a wasteland, had no witnesses. When no one responded to the police's knock and offered to surrender, they forced entry, hoping to find Channon alive inside. Inside the house, the police found Channon's purse, a stuffed toy from her car, Christopher's headphones and baseball cap, and a knife with blood traces. They also discovered torn and blood-stained fragments of women's clothing and, tragically, Channon's lifeless body hidden in the house's trash chute system, wrapped in 5 trash bags and bound in the fetal position under dirty sheets. Experts later determined that she likely died in the early hours of Monday, January 8th. The discovery of Channon Christian's body revealed a terrifying sequence of events. Had the police begun their search immediately, they might have saved her from unimaginable suffering. Instead, her body was found with every inch covered in bruises, abrasions, cuts, and cigarette burns. The numerous injuries to her genital area, mouth and throat indicated that she had been subjected to multiple brutal assaults by several men. Channon suffered a severe head injury, internal bleeding in her abdominal area, likely caused by kicks. Multiple stab wounds, though not fatal, were inflicted upon her. Her attackers also extinguished dozens of cigarettes on her skin in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. They doused her with household bleach, focusing on bleeding wounds and her genital area. She was then forced to ingest bleach. 5 individuals were involved in the brutal crimes against Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. Lamarcus Davidson, the owner of the house where Channon's mutilated body and Chris's personal belongings were found, was identified as a fugitive. The police also tracked down Eric Boyd, whose DNA was found at the crime scene. Boyd was arrested on January 11th without resisting and agreed to cooperate with the investigation, stating he wouldn't take the fall for crimes he didn't commit. Boyd revealed that Davidson was hiding in a vacant house listed for sale and personally led the police to the location. As a result, Davidson was caught off guard and offered no resistance. Notably, at the time of his arrest, Davidson was wearing Chris's sneakers. During the investigation, Davidson downplayed his role, portraying himself as a victim. He claimed that the couple had come to his house to buy illegal substances, but got caught up in a conflict with his acquaintances. Davidson insisted that he left to avoid involvement, and the subsequent brutal acts occurred while he was away. Further investigation led to the identification of 3 more individuals involved in the case: Davidson's friend George Thomas, his half-brother Latalvis Cobbins, and Vanessa Lynn Coleman, an 18-year-old woman. Once all 5 suspects were arrested, they were put in separate cells and questioned one by one. Each of them tried to shift the blame onto the others, unknowingly providing details of the brutal crime. The pieces of their stories helped to reconstruct the sequence of events and the role each played in the brutal act. Lamarcus Davidson, recently released from prison on parole, was in dire need of money. To support his illegal business of selling banned substances, he urgently needed a vehicle to deliver his goods to customers. Davidson decided to steal a car from an underground parking lot notorious for its lack of surveillance cameras, accompanied by his accomplices. Tragically, students Shannon and Christopher were in the parking lot at the same time, arguing over Chris's delay. The criminals, fearing witnesses, forced the couple into the trunk of a car at gunpoint. They was taken to Davidson's house, where they were subjected to brutal beating and repeated assault. After midnight, Christopher, barefoot and undressed, was forced back into the trunk and taken to the railroad tracks. He was ordered to walk on the stones before being shot twice in the back. The final shot to the head ended his suffering. His body was then doused with a flammable liquid and set on fire in an attempt to destroy any evidence that could lead to the perpetrators. After dealing with Christopher, the criminals returned to the house where Shannon remained bound. The next day, she endured horrific cruelty, leaving her with no uninjured area on her body. The sadists concluded their torture by dousing her with bleach and packing her, still alive, into plastic trash bags, where she slowly suffocated. The exact moment Vanessa Coleman joined the group is unknown. In her interrogations, Coleman claimed she was a hostage who participated in the torture out of fear for her life. However, Boyd said Coleman was Davidson's girlfriend and willingly took part in the events, even taking Shannon's jewelry and mobile phone. Moreover, a diary found at Coleman's home described the horrors at her boyfriend's house, which she called an exciting adventure. During the trials, it was established that Lamarcus Davidson, born in 1981, led the criminal group and instigated the brutal acts against the victims. Although Davidson tried to shift the blame, claiming the couple had come to buy drugs and engaged in consensual rough sex that got out of control, the evidence proved otherwise. Davidson was found guilty on 40 counts, including assault, kidnapping, robbery, and cruel and premeditated murder. The jury unanimously sentenced him to death for his heinous crimes. Latalvis Cobbins, born 1982, was initially faced with the death penalty for his role in the brutal torture, assaults, and murder. However, he was ultimately handed a life imprisonment sentence without parole. George Thomas, born 1983, received a similar life sentence for his involvement in the same heinous crimes, with no possibility of release. Eric Boyd, who cooperated with the investigation and aided in the capture of Davidson, received an 18-year prison sentence. The investigation discovered Vanessa Coleman's, born 1988, involvement in the torture, assaults, and tragic murder of Shannon. She was subsequently sentenced to 53 years imprisonment. In 2011, while the convicted felons served their sentences and Davidson awaited execution, the case took an unexpected turn. The presiding judge resigned, citing substance dependency issues, which called into question his ability to conduct the trial fairly. As a result, all verdicts from the previous 2 years were annulled, and new hearings were scheduled for the 5 individuals responsible for the tragic murder of the students. After retrials, Davidson's death sentence was upheld. Cobbins and Thomas both remained incarcerated, each serving a life sentence without parole. However, Thomas's sentence was later modified to include the possibility of parole after 51 years. Vanessa Coleman's original 53-year sentence was reduced to 35 years. Although her 2014 appeal was rejected and parole was denied in 2017, she will remain incarcerated until at least April 2032, as determined by the parole board in 2020. Eric Boyd's circumstances drastically changed. Initially, he got a short sentence for cooperating, but was later retried and received life without parole for his role in the assaults and deaths of 2 victims. His accomplice Thomas testified against him, revealing new details, and got a 15% sentence reduction. Boyd's appeals failed, and he's now serving life at Bledsoe County Correctional Complex. Davidson awaits execution in Riverbend Max Security. The trial sparked media frenzy, leading to 2 new laws. One protects victims from defamation by the accused, who try to shift blame. The other eliminates the need for a judge's signature on a unanimous verdict, preventing retrials and sentence reviews. The house where Channing Christian and Christopher Newsom were brutally tortured was demolished in 2008. A memorial was built on the site in their memory. A charity foundation and golf tournament were established in Christian's name to support violence victims. A foundation in Newsom's name hosts annual baseball tournaments and awards a scholarship in his memory. Initial media reports of the case were inaccurate, sparking public outcry. Some believed racial bias played a role, given the victims were white and perpetrators African American. However, experts and the police chief found no evidence to support this claim, nor that the case would have received more attention if the races were reversed. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shanynthia Gardner. Shanynthia Gardner was born in Memphis, Tennessee, in the late 1980s. Shaninthia's childhood was relatively ordinary. She was a beautiful, slender, curly-haired brunette with a talent for music and a creative spirit. She had a gift for composing songs and singing, which earned her local recognition and fame. Her love for music was just one of her passions. In addition to singing, Shanynthia enjoyed fashion and photography. She was a natural in front of the camera and had an artistic eye for capturing everyday moments. Despite her many creative pursuits, Shanynthia was also devoted to charity and her faith. She regularly attended church and prioritized her family's needs. Her life seemed to be on a promising path, filled with potential and possibilities. Shanynthia was 14 years old when she met Dur Clayton through mutual friends. They quickly discovered common interests and became friends. As they grew older and graduated from high school, their friendship evolved into a romantic relationship. They were perceived as a serious and stable young couple, but had some minor run-ins with the law, including traffic violations and disorderly conduct. In 2008, Dur faced a serious accusation of assaulting a woman, although it was allegedly unintentional. Fortunately for him, the charges were eventually dropped. That same year, Shanynthia and Dur began living together, and they had a son. Shanynthia took on a caring motherly role not only to their son but also to Dur's 2 children from a previous relationship. Sonia Clayton, Dur's mother, considered Shanynthia a part of their family, not just she her son loved. Shaninthia's devotion to her children made her special in Sonia's eyes. Although the relationship between Shanynthia and Dur was short-lived, they maintained some contact after the breakup. In Sonia's opinion, Shanynthia remained a good partner and caring mother to Dur. Shaninthia's marriage to Martin Gardner marked a new chapter in her life. He brought joy and stability, and she won him over with her kindness and love for children. To Martin, Shanynthia embodied feminine tenderness and wisdom. Shanynthia and Martin's life together progressed quickly. In September 2013, They moved into an apartment in southeast Shelby County and started their life together. After their wedding, they welcomed their first child, Telone. The following year, Saya was born, and soon after, two more girls, Savi and Yazzie, joined the family. In total, Martin and Shanynthia had 4 children together, in addition to Shaninthia's child from a previous relationship. For the young mom, her children were always the top priority. She enjoyed her part-time work at the Children's Hospital and was also actively involved in a center that raised funds to support children in need. Helping others was her true calling, and she dedicated her life to it with gratitude. Friday, July 1st, 2016, began like any other ordinary day. At around noon, Shanynthia was speaking with her husband, Martin, over the phone. Her voice remained calm, as it typically was. She told her husband she was going to watch a movie with the kids, giving no indication that anything was amiss on this ordinary day. However, during a quiet conversation between the spouses, a sudden and inexplicable madness took hold of Shanynthia. She grabbed a kitchen knife and entered the living room, where she attacked her 6-month-old daughter, Yazzie. The defenseless baby was caught off guard and her life was brutally cut short by the person she trusted most. The eldest child, at just 7 years old, witnessed this horrific scene unfold before his eyes, unable to fully comprehend the tragedy. Panicked and desperate, he fled the house. Shanynthia pursued him, still armed with the knife, intent on continuing her rampage. She chased after Dur, but his terrified screams caught the attention of the neighbors. A couple of neighbors rushed outside after hearing screams and were met with a horrific scene that would haunt them. Shanynthia stopped attacking Dur when she realized she was being watched. However, the horror was far from over. Chania went back inside the house, where her children, Savi and Telone, were waiting. In a state of distress, she went upstairs to the bedroom where the younger children were, marking the end of their innocent lives. The witnesses quickly called emergency services, requesting help for Dur and his siblings. At that moment, no one could have predicted the tragic outcome that awaited the quiet neighborhood. When the sheriff's personnel arrived, they were confronted with a gruesome scene. Inside the house, they found 4 lifeless children, covered in blood. The sight was shocking. Shanynthia calmly called her husband, Martin, and confessed to killing their children. The house was now filled with blood and horror. The investigators had obtained a bloody knife. Chaplains and specialists were called in to provide support to Dur, who had endured unimaginable trauma and required immediate attention. The sheriff's department launched a major operation, cordoning off the apartment complex, including the golf area and country club. Shanynthia was taken into custody without bail, and her trial was swiftly scheduled for July 5th. Despite the heinous nature of her crimes, Shanynthia was still a mother and partner, someone who had once nurtured love, care, and joy. A friend of Shanynthia, Michelle Jaiman, actively defended Shanynthia on social media, countering the unjust accusations and emphasizing a key factor: postpartum depression. The case sparked discussions, with Dr. Joel Rissman, a psychiatrist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, noting that mothers killing their children is rare and often linked to mental health problems. Dr. Rissman also highlighted the state's insufficient mental health funding, which frequently leaves families without vital support. Dr. Diane Barnes, a specialist in psychology and postpartum health, clarified the distinction between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. She emphasized that these are 2 separate conditions with distinct symptoms. Although the exact nature of Shaninthia's condition required further examination, Dr. Barnes expressed skepticism that a woman experiencing postpartum depression would commit such acts, instead suggesting psychosis as a more plausible explanation. Dur's father did not believe Shanynthia was guilty. Although he was not his son's guardian, he was able to visit him after his relationship with Shanynthia ended, but this stopped in November 2014. He noticed Shanynthia becoming more radical and controlling. His attempts to contact his son were unsuccessful, and he was excluded from his life. Those close to Shanynthia noticed a significant change in her. She began experiencing discomfort, which turned into anxiety, paranoia, and panic attacks. Her behavior became unpredictable, and some suspected postpartum depression. This was a shock, as Shanynthia was seen as strong and dependable. She had always been in control, but now seemed to be struggling. Shaninthia's sudden change in behavior in March 2015 left many people baffled. At first, her friends and family couldn't understand what was happening. One day, she left work early, picked up her children, and drove them down an unfamiliar road, away from their home. Her husband, Martin, thought she was just going for a walk in a park, which was a normal part of her daily routine, so he wasn't immediately concerned. However, as the hours went by, Shanynthia never came home, which worried Martin greatly. He decided to alert the authorities to look out for his wife, who was driving with their 5 children. Shanynthia drove over 74 miles east, from Memphis to Corinth, but it's unclear why she chose that destination, as she didn't know anyone there. She was later found in the emergency room of St. Francis Hospital, but the police didn't explain how she ended up there. Shanynthia had superficial cuts on her neck and one wrist. If she had attempted to harm herself, her children were the only witnesses, but they were too young to understand what was happening. Eventually, the authorities brought Shanynthia home. However, her behavior became even more unusual after that. She told Martin that someone was threatening her and their family, which shocked him, as she provided no details about the supposed threat or who was behind it. There had been no previous incidents of this kind. When Shanynthia was with family and friends, she began complaining about her job and workload, claiming it made her feel terrible. She soon started saying that some co-workers wanted to harm her. Despite these strange claims, Shanynthia showed no signs of being violent or abusive towards her children or others. The investigation into Shanynthia Gardner's case proved to be a challenging process. Craig Morton, her defense attorney, opted not to discuss the case with the media in its initial stages, deeming it premature for such comments. During the court hearing on July 5, 2016, Shanynthia remained silent, appearing via video link. Despite being questioned by Judge Lambert, she refrained from speaking. Following the trial, Shanynthia was transferred to the Mental Health Institute. Her relatives attended the courthouse but chose not to speak with reporters. Meanwhile, Morton's attorney and prosecutor Jennifer Nichols intended to file a motion to preserve evidence, including information obtained from social media. January 2017 saw Shanynthia formally charged with 4 counts: aggravated child abuse, aggravated murder with a deadly weapon, another count of aggravated child abuse, and child neglect. The investigation into the mysterious and gruesome events continued, leaving the community seeking justice and answers to numerous questions. During the hearing, loved ones of Shanynthia testified about the events of that fateful day. Sonia, Martin's mother, was shocked to learn of the tragedy and rushed to the scene to find her grandson, Der. Initially, she thought something supernatural was involved, but as the shock wore off, she considered possible motives. Sonia wondered if their potential divorce and fear of caring for 5 children alone might have driven Shanynthia to commit the horrific act. The trial was significantly delayed due to Shaninthia's multiple psychiatric evaluations. However, in 2021, the non-jury trial finally commenced. The defense centered its strategy around Shaninthia's mental illness, while the prosecution acknowledged her condition but argued that she could distinguish right from wrong and understood the illegality of her actions. In December 2021, Judge James of the Shelby County Criminal Court rejected the defense's argument, and Shanynthia Gardner was found guilty of all charges. 2 months later, Shanynthia, 34, appeared in court for sentencing, accompanied by her husband Martin. Judge James sentenced her to life in prison for each murder count, plus 15 years for each count of child abuse and neglect. Shanynthia can apply for parole only after serving 51 years. Considering the 5 years she spent in prison before sentencing, she will be eligible for parole in approximately 46 years, at the age of 80. After the sentencing, the prosecutor expressed agreement with the decision, citing that it aligned with their goal of achieving justice for Martin and his children. Upon hearing the verdict, Martin felt a sense of relief knowing that Shanynthia would no longer be able to harm any more children. An evening vigil was held at the apartment complex where the family lived, attended by neighbors, family members, and law enforcement officers. The gathering was a tribute to the innocent victims, with attendees holding red and white candles and offering prayers for the departed souls. The Reverend Pastor of the Baptist Church emphasized that the vigil marked the beginning of the community's healing process. He noted that those present were united in their desire to support the surviving baby and his father during this challenging time. Dar did not attend the memorial ceremony, with his grandmother Sonia explaining to the media that he was too consumed by anger to participate. The president and CEO of the Children's Hospital where Shanynthia worked extended condolences on behalf of the hospital staff. Martin's colleagues created a social media account to support him with the funeral arrangements for his 4 children. At the ceremony, Martin displayed remarkable strength and dignity in his speech as he shared a few words about his children and family. He concluded by emphasizing that his home was once filled with happiness when his children and Shanynthia were present, and that he would always cherish this memory. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Williams. Michelle was raised in Hurst, a suburb of Dallas, Texas, alongside her younger sister Laura. After their mother left to pursue a better life, their father took on the responsibility of raising them. However, he struggled to provide for the family, often relying on unstable construction work and seeking solace in alcohol. In an attempt to make ends meet, Michelle's father devised and carried out schemes to obtain easy money. He would take jobs at factories, intentionally injure himself, and collect insurance payouts. Although this tactic initially worked, it was eventually exposed with the help of CCTV cameras at one of his workplaces, resulting in his arrest and imprisonment. Growing up in an environment filled with deception and manipulation, Michelle became accustomed to a life of dishonesty. She desperately sought escape from this reality, but the lies and deceit had become ingrained in her way of life, making it difficult for her to imagine an alternative. Michelle longed to grow up quickly and leave her impoverished life behind. By the age of 15, she had developed into an attractive young woman, drawing attention from both her peers and older individuals. Michelle soon discovers that she can use her femininity and charm to influence the men around her and get what she wants. As a result, she enters a series of romantic relationships with various men. At 17, Michelle drops out of school and marries 16-year-old Kenneth O'Brien, telling him she's pregnant. Kenneth takes responsibility for his young wife and unborn child, joining the army to provide for them. They move frequently, having 2 more children, but Michelle grows dissatisfied with their nomadic lifestyle and temporary military housing. After 5 years, Michelle leaves Kenneth, citing his infidelity and physical abuse as reasons for the divorce. She returns to her hometown of Hurst, portraying herself as a victim of domestic violence to garner support from relatives and friends. As Michelle rebuilds her life, she reconnects with an old classmate, Brandon, and falls in love. Brandon is smitten with Michelle and happily accepts her 3 children from her previous marriage. They were preparing to get married, but just before the wedding, Brandon became furious with Michelle. He discovered that she had not finalized her divorce from her first husband. Michelle had been afraid to discuss the divorce with her ex-husband due to his abusive behavior, and as a result, she hadn't sent the necessary documents. With the help of a lawyer, they quickly resolved the issue, and they was able to get married in 1994. Initially, their family life was peaceful and routine. Brandon focused on growing his IT company, while Michelle worked as a dental assistant. However, Michelle had bigger aspirations. She began bringing home various dental equipment and supplies. Brandon's concerns grew as he suspected something was wrong. It was later revealed that Michelle had been stealing. Fortunately, they avoided going to trial. However, this incident marked the beginning of Brandon's trust issues with his wife. When neighbors reported that cars frequently visited their house while Brandon was at work, he installed a tape recorder in several rooms. Upon listening to the recordings, he discovered that various men were visiting their home throughout the day. Brandon conducted his own investigation and discovered that Michelle's first marriage ended in divorce due to her repeated infidelities, contradicting her claim that it was her husband's abuse. Upon learning this, Brandon reached his limit and requested a divorce. Enraged that Brandon was the one to initiate the split, Michelle sought revenge while he was away at work. Brandon had a valuable saltwater aquarium with thousands of dollars worth of fish. Michelle destroyed it by pouring Comet into the tank, killing all the fish. But that was not the end of her destructive behavior. Brandon's dog, Domino, was also a victim of Michelle's cruelty. She gave the dog sleeping pills, which led to its death. However, this was only the beginning of Brandon's nightmare. Michelle's actions continued to cause harm, and Brandon eventually learned the truth about her when his marriage was ruined. What Michelle did to Brandon was not an isolated incident. Her treatment of other men was even more shocking. It was later discovered that Michelle's first child was the child of her and John Paul Ray, a high school classmate of hers. Instead of telling John the truth, Michelle convinces Kenneth O'Brien that the child is his and he is forced to marry her. For 13 years, Kenneth believed the child was his child and even paid child support from age 5 to 18. After Michelle's divorce from Brandon, she moved in with John, the father of her first child. They lived together in a common-law marriage for 8 years. However, their relationship ended abruptly when John suspected Michelle of cheating on him. Michelle confirmed she was having an affair, which led to John moving out and leaving most of her belongings behind. She then met Greg Williams, a man with a history of marital failures, having been married twice before and having a daughter named Taylor from his previous marriage to Katie. After Greg and Katie's divorce in 2003, they shared custody of Taylor and maintained a good relationship, which made a formal child support agreement unnecessary. Greg was a successful and generous man who seemed like a perfect partner for Michelle. In 2007, Greg and Michelle had a daughter named Michaela, and they got married a year later. Their marriage seemed like the epitome of the American dream, with plenty of money, children, and love. Michelle appeared to have finally achieved the life she had always wanted. Greg came from a family with strong principles and had achieved success through his own hard work from a young age. He was a sports enthusiast and a black belt in martial arts. Both Greg and Michelle owned guns, which they kept in their home in Keller. Michelle kept a silver .40 caliber pistol in a safe, while Greg stored his black LAA .45 caliber gun, always loaded, in a case under his bedside table. Despite their differences, they was committed to making their marriage work. They regularly hosted birthday parties for their children from previous relationships at their home in Keller. Michelle's adult children frequently hosted barbecues and pool parties at their home, which was always filled with friends. Despite their idyllic suburban life and bright daughter, Michelle and her husband Greg didn't fit the traditional American couple mold. They had met through an online forum for those interested in bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism, and their raucous adult gatherings had drawn numerous complaints from their neighbors. On October 13, 2011, at 4:40 a.m., an emergency call was made by a frantic woman, claiming she and her husband had been attacked by an intruder. She reported being injured and her husband shot. Police quickly arrived at the scene, discovered a blaring television and a baby sleeping on the couch inside the house. Michelle's daughter was fast asleep and unharmed during the incident. However, Michelle's behavior raised suspicions among the police officers who arrived at the scene. Despite claiming to have just experienced a burglary and assault, Michelle appeared remarkably calm and composed. Her hair was styled, and she was fully dressed, which seemed inconsistent with her story. The police soon cordoned off the entire gated community and thoroughly searched the home. As the investigation progressed, Michelle was taken to the Keller Township Police Station for further questioning. Over several hours of interrogation, her account of the events began to unravel. Michelle initially claimed that an intruder, dressed in black, had struck her on the head with a wrench. She alleged that she fell to the ground but remained conscious and heard a gunshot. According to her, the intruder then fled through the back door. However, the evidence at the scene contradicted her story. Greg Williams, the victim, was found shot in the head while lying in bed. A .45 caliber handgun and a wrench were discovered near the back door, but the circumstances suggested that Michelle's account was not entirely credible. The investigation found no fingerprints on the weapons and no signs of forced entry. The family's valuables, including a large sum of cash, were left untouched. Security footage revealed that the only car to enter the gated community before the crime belonged to a newspaper delivery person. Michelle attempted to mislead the police by fabricating a story about the attack. She even went so far as to injure herself with a wrench and stage the scene. However, detectives noticed inconsistencies in her account. The discovery of the gun used in the crime, devoid of fingerprints, further raised suspicions. The final discrepancy was the untouched $20,000 in cash, which Michelle couldn't explain. While Michelle was unable to provide a reason for why her husband, a successful businessman and devoted father, would take his own life, she was able to justify her own actions. Michelle claimed she wanted to protect their young daughter from the painful truth about her father's death. She told the police that she had cleaned the gun and washed her husband Greg's hands to remove fingerprints, and then staged a fake home invasion before calling for help. This explanation seemed strange, but it explained why no evidence of an intruder was found. Michelle also admitted to using bleach to clean up the crime scene and hitting herself in the face with a wrench to make the attack look more believable. From the start, the police in Keller suspected that Michelle's story was not true, but at the time, they did not have any physical evidence that linked her to the crime. Michelle was arrested for lying to the police, but she was later released. Around 5 p.m. on the day of her husband's murder, Michelle visited her sister Laura's home. During the evening, Michelle cried occasionally, but her sister felt that Michelle's tears seemed insincere. Notably, Michelle didn't mention her late husband's name once. The next morning, when questioned by police, Michelle appeared to be in a great mood. She was well-dressed, had styled her hair, and was wearing makeup. Despite the ongoing investigation into her husband's death, Michelle went out for breakfast at a popular restaurant. As investigators struggled to find a motive and credible evidence, Michelle inadvertently provided them with both. During her initial interrogation, Michelle claimed she wasn't interested in money. However, her actions after Greg's death told a different story. She quickly began selling off assets from their family businesses and spending large sums of money. Michelle had been cashing checks through her husband Greg's IT company, but the exact amount is unknown. It is likely that the amount was substantial. After selling the Blueberries frozen yogurt store in Keller, Michelle made a crucial mistake. She attempted to claim the payout on Greg's life insurance policy, for which she was the sole beneficiary. The policy was taken out on August 12, 2011, nearly 2 months before Greg's death. However, Michelle overlooked a key detail: the policy did not cover Greg's death since he had taken his own life. As a result, the insurance company denied her the $60,000 payout, which was the primary motive for the crime. Later, another financial irregularity came to light that raised suspicions about Michelle. It was discovered that she had used falsified financial documents to secure a mortgage loan for the house that she and Greg were planning to buy before his death. The account numbers had been intentionally altered, and the lender did not immediately detect the elaborate scheme. Following Greg's death, Michelle canceled a meeting with the mortgage company, and the fake account went undiscussed until it caught the attention of the police. Despite the scrutiny, Michelle felt confident in her ability to avoid consequences and wrote a check for $188,000 to attorney Kenneth Wincorn. She then took a week-long vacation to Grapevine with her children. During a 3-month investigation into Greg Williams' death, police uncovered a web of deceit spun by his wife, Michelle. An autopsy revealed that Greg was shot from a distance of 12 to 18 inches. A toxicology report also showed that Greg had a large amount of sleeping pills in his system at the time of his death. Further investigation found no evidence of a break-in or assault on the house. Instead, police determined that Michelle had sedated her husband, turned up the TV volume, and shot him from close range. Their daughter was asleep in her room and did not hear the shooting. On November 3, 2011, the Tarrant County Medical Examiner officially ruled Greg's death a homicide. Michelle Williams was arrested on January 9 while on her way to a fitness center. She was charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and providing a false statement to police. As the sole witness and suspect, Michelle's bail was set at $522,000. However, she spent only a week in custody before being released on a reduced bail of $85,000. Michelle walked out of jail wearing gym clothes and a GPS monitor, accompanied by her new attorney, Kenneth Wincorn. However, this news infuriated Kathy, Greg's first wife, as she had paid Wincorn with money from Greg's estate, which she believed should not be used to defend Michelle, who was accused of killing Greg. According to online court records, Kenneth Wincorn's law firm had handled Greg and his ex-wife Kathy's divorce in 2003, and his name appeared on documents related to the custody agreement for their daughter Taylor in 2008. However, Wincorn later provided evidence showing his company, rather than him personally, had handled Greg's divorce case, which cleared him of the accusations that he had colluded with Michelle. Kenneth Wincorn learned of Greg's murder from an IT company employee. He described the news as shocking. Later, Michelle sought his help after her attempt to profit from Greg's death failed. Michelle changed her name to Shelley and presented herself as a fitness guru on Facebook. She publicly revealed her relationship with Gene Wallace, a friend of her oldest son who is nearly 15 years younger than her. Shelley and Gene opened a fitness club in Bedford and actively promoted it online. Michelle spent the next few months attending court hearings, enjoying her new relationship, and participating in fitness classes while wearing a GPS tracking ankle bracelet. Her courtroom attire often included miniskirts, knee-length boots, and revealing blouses. According to Greg's ex-wife Kathy, Michelle never showed any signs of mourning Greg's death. Rob Conover, a friend of Greg's for over 20 years, attended many of Michelle's hearings. He observed how Michelle skillfully manipulated police officers, portraying herself as an innocent woman in need of protection. On October 9, 2013, 45-year-old Michelle took a plea deal, pleading guilty to tampering with evidence and deadly conduct. Michelle Williams has been sentenced to 18 years in prison for tampering with evidence and engaging in deadly, dangerous conduct. This is a third-degree felony that is only recognized in a few states. Initially, Michelle admitted to cleaning the gun and her husband Greg's body, but the lack of her DNA at the scene raised doubts about the first-degree murder charge. The trial of Michelle Williams, also known as Keller's Black Widow, has begun. Prosecutors allege that she intentionally targeted her husband in 2011 to collect on his substantial life insurance policy. They described the crime as a clearly planned scheme motivated by greed. According to prosecutors, Michelle drugged her husband with sleeping pills and then shot him in the head to collect the insurance payout. Michelle admitted to cleaning the gun and Greg's body, but the lack of her DNA at the scene raised doubts about the first-degree murder charge. In a statement, Michelle's attorney, Kenneth Wincorn, highlighted the challenges in the case due to the thoroughly cleaned crime scene. If the jury finds that Michelle tampered with evidence and cleaned up the crime scene, she could receive a life sentence. During the trial, prosecutors stated that in the hours preceding the violent death, Greg Williams had a heated argument with his wife over financial issues. The altercation escalated to the point where he slapped her for spending a significant amount of money intended for a house down payment. In contrast, Michelle Williams' defense team claimed that Greg Williams took his own life. Defense attorney Clay Graham added that Greg Williams frequently struggled with depression and was known to use sedatives and steroids regularly. Michelle Williams' husband, Greg, was found dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Michelle stated that she attempted to cover up the incident to shield her 4-year-old daughter from the truth. Throughout the court hearings, Michelle maintained a composed appearance but showed some emotional response when presented with photographs of her deceased husband. Michelle planned to blame Greg's ex-wife for the crime, claiming it was due to custody disputes. However, this plan was flawed as there were no actual disputes. Michelle's adult son testified against her, revealing she had asked him to assist in framing Greg's ex-wife. After many hours of deliberation, the jury found Michelle guilty of tampering with physical evidence, a felony offense. She received a harsh sentence, 60 years in prison, with the stipulation that she must serve at least 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. Michelle has not expressed remorse for her actions and continues to evade full responsibility for her crimes. She is currently serving her time at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville, Texas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rachel O'Reilly. Rachel O'Reilly was born in 1974 in County Dublin, Ireland. Her biological parents are unknown, but she was adopted at a young age by Rose and Jim Calley, who raised her along with their 4 other adopted children. Rachel was a responsible and driven child. She excelled in school, played sports, helped with household chores, and never caused any trouble. As she grew up, she became a sociable, open, and exceptionally kind person. She got along with everyone and avoided conflict whenever possible. As a teenager, Rachel was a skilled softball player, participating in numerous competitions and setting local records. Her closest relationship was with her adoptive mother, Rose, with whom she shared all her secrets and stayed in close touch even after she got married and had children of her own. Rachel decided to pursue a degree in marketing from a local university after completing high school. She also landed a job as a salesperson at a city department store and continued to play sports for a local team in her free time. Joe O'Reilly, born in 1972 in County Dublin, Joe grew up in a simple family as the second child of his parents, with an older sister. His parents instilled in him the value of hard work and self-reliance, not spoiling him or his sister. Joe was a tall and athletic boy who enjoyed playing softball. After high school, he chose to study advertising through correspondence and took a job as a manager at a department store. A few months later, Rachel would start working at the same store. Joe was 19 years old when he first met Rachel, who was just 17. He was immediately drawn to her and introduced himself, but despite being charmed by her bright smile and blonde hair, she refused to go on a date with him. Undeterred, Joe began to try to win her over, showering her with compliments and small gifts, such as flowers and chocolates, which he would leave at her workstation in the morning. However, no matter how hard he tried, Rachel remained unimpressed. The entire department store staff was entertained by Joe's attempts to get Rachel's attention, and it even became a running joke. Despite initial challenges, Joe persevered. He made an effort to read Rachel's favorite book, hoping to find common ground for conversation. However, it wasn't until he discovered her passion for softball that he made significant progress. Joe attended one of her games, joined in during practice, and showcased his skills on the field. As a result, the team won, and Rachel was finally impressed by his determination and athletic abilities. She agreed to go on a date with him, and their relationship began to blossom. As they spent more time together, Joe went to great lengths to prove his commitment and affection. He planned a surprise trip to Paris, a city he knew Rachel would love. In a romantic gesture, he proposed to her at the top of the Eiffel Tower. Rachel was overwhelmed by the surprise and happily accepted his proposal. She thought she had found her perfect match, a true prince who would make her happy for the rest of her life. A few years after their wedding, they had 2 sons. They moved to a peaceful and scenic area in Scotland, where they bought a spacious and cozy home, ideal for raising their children. After the birth of their first son, Rachel left her job to focus on taking care of her family. 2 years later, their second son was born, and Rachel dedicated herself to raising their children. Meanwhile, Joe secured a job at an advertising agency, specializing in outdoor advertising, which proved to be a successful career move for him. Those who knew Joe personally described him as a confident, driven, and charming individual. At work, he demonstrated his responsibility, expertise, and attention to detail. As they grew older and started attending kindergarten, Rachel began working as a distributor for a popular cosmetics company and selling household goods to earn extra income. This job allowed her to interact more with her neighbors, who praised her as a wonderful mother and a kind, open person. Meanwhile, Joe became increasingly absent from home, only returning to sleep, shower, and change clothes. He attributed his absence to his demanding work schedule and an upcoming promotion he was eagerly anticipating. Rachel supported Joe as best she could, but as time passed, they started to drift apart, and their family relationships began to deteriorate significantly. A disturbing incident occurred in the summer of 2004 when an anonymous person sent a letter to Child Protective Services, falsely accusing Rachel of being a bad mother who mistreated her sons. In response, a special commission visited their home to investigate the allegations. Although the investigation found no evidence of wrongdoing, and relatives and neighbors described Rachel as a loving and caring mother, the malicious letter damaged her reputation. On the morning of Monday, October 4, 2004, the O'Reilly household began as usual. Joe, the father, left for work at dawn while his wife, Rachel, and their sons were still asleep. Throughout the day, Joe tried to contact Rachel by texting and calling her, but she didn't respond. He then called their home phone, but the answering machine picked up, and Joe left a worried message, asking Rachel to call him back as soon as possible. Later that afternoon, Joe received a call from the kindergarten teacher, informing him that Rachel had not arrived to pick up their sons, which was unusual. Joe then called his mother-in-law, Rose, to ask if she knew Rachel's whereabouts. When Rose said she didn't know, Joe asked her to check on their house and see if everything was okay. Meanwhile, Joe went to the kindergarten to pick up the children. When Rose arrived at the house, she found Rachel's car in the yard, indicating that Rachel was home. However, the house was dark and quiet, and Rose's calls went unanswered. As Rose entered the house, she was immediately struck by the scene of chaos before her. Cabinets and drawers were open, with their contents scattered all over the floor, giving the appearance of a robbery. Upon entering the bedroom, Rose's was met with a horrific sight. Rachel lay lifeless on the floor, surrounded by a massive pool of her own blood. The walls, furniture, and even the ceiling were splattered with blood, and Rachel's tangled, bloody hair partially concealed her skull. In some places, the bare bones of her skull were visible. Rose rushed to her daughter, hoping against hope that she was still alive and could be saved. But when she touched Rachel's arm, she felt it was cold and stiff. It was clear that Rachel had been dead for hours, and there was nothing that could be done to help her. Overcome with grief and unable to collect her thoughts, Rose began screaming and calling for help. She then rushed to the phone to dial the police. Her screams alerted the neighbors, one of whom was a doctor. The doctor was the first to examine the body and confirm that Rachel was beyond help. When Joe arrived at the house, he was met with a crowd of people who had already gathered there. Upon learning of his wife's death, he was overcome with grief, screaming and running inside the house, exclaiming that he didn't believe the news. In the bedroom, he became hysterical beside his wife's body, crying and vowing to kill the person responsible for her murder. According to the police officers who responded to the scene, the crime was one of the most brutal they had ever encountered. The victim, Rachel, had been beaten to death with a heavy blunt object with incredible force. It appeared that she had been attacked from behind, as she showed no signs of having tried to resist or fight back. At first, the scene resembled a robbery, but the investigators' instincts suggested that the brutality of the attack indicated a personal motive or intense dislike. However, it was unclear who would have wanted to harm the Rachel, who was a mother of two. The detectives began by interviewing Rachel's family members and neighbors, who all confirmed that she was a friendly person with no known enemies or conflicts. None of the neighbors reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious on the day of the murder. Joe provided an alibi, stating that he was at the bus depot on the other side of town for work, which could be corroborated by a coworker. The scene looked like a robbery, but nothing valuable was taken. A €1,000 note was left untouched on the bedside table, and another stash of money was found in a kitchen cupboard, also untouched. A jewelry box on the dressing table was disturbed, but only a pair of chains and earrings were missing, found separately in a drawer. The homeowner reported that a digital camera, silverware, and one of his dumbbells, likely the murder weapon, were missing. The investigation found the situation suspicious. The house was in disarray, and Rachel was brutally murdered, yet only a few items were taken. Joe, answering police questions, was visibly shaken, crying, and feverish. However, one investigator believed that Joe's behavior seemed more like nervous excitement than grief or shock. When asked if his wife might have had an affair, Joe's demeanor changed, and he confidently denied it. He then added that he had not cheated on his wife, but this statement seemed unconvincing. A bag containing stolen items from the house was discovered in the bushes, 2 miles from the crime scene. The bag held a camera, silverware, and a few pieces of jewelry, all of which were on the list of stolen items compiled by Joe. This new evidence led investigators to rule out the possibility of a robbery and reclassify the case as a premeditated murder. As a result, Joe, who had been trying to appear grief-stricken, became the prime suspect. His attempts to convey pain and sorrow seemed insincere, raising suspicions about his involvement in the crime. Joe didn't have an alibi to present, so the detectives had to investigate the details of his day to piece together what happened. According to Joe, he started the morning by stopping at the gym, a routine he followed regularly. The surveillance cameras in the gym's parking lot and inside the gym confirmed his presence. After his gym visit, Joe drove to the office and then headed to a remote bus station in the city to check on the placement of advertisements on buses. A colleague corroborated Joe's account, recalling a phone conversation they had around that time. The investigators then visited Joe's workplace to inspect his computer. This led to a significant discovery. Joe's email contained some suspicious messages that he had partially deleted. Specialists were able to recover the deleted emails, and the police became convinced they were on the right track. Most of the recovered emails were exchanges with Joe's friend and sister, in which he frequently complained about his wife, Rachel, using derogatory language and profanity. Joe's wife had not been attractive to him for a long time, and in fact, he felt a strong sense of disgust towards her. Meanwhile, investigators discovered a suspicious correspondence between Joe and a female colleague named Nikki Pell. Their communication suggested that they were more than just friends and warranted further questioning. Nikki Pell worked at the same advertising company as Joe and was 10 years his senior. Despite their age difference, they had begun an affair. It was unclear when exactly their workplace romance started, but it was evident that Joe spent a significant amount of time with Nikki, often staying late into the evenings and even nights. Joe's wife was unaware of this and was misled into believing that he was busy with work. What was even more alarming was the content of Joe's messages to Nikki, in which he promised that they would soon be together, referring to her as a potential stepmother to his children with his wife, Rachel. Such messages raised suspicions, especially considering that in the event of a divorce, the children would likely remain with their mother. Joe initially denied having an affair, but when faced with irrefutable evidence of his infidelity, he was forced to admit to secretly dating Nikki for some time. Although they had reportedly broken up for over a week before the incident. This revelation raised questions. Following the discovery of the body, the O'Reilly house was sealed off as a crime scene, and no one was allowed to enter while the police conducted a thorough investigation. During this time, Joe stayed with his sister, and the children stayed with their grandparents. At the funeral, Joe was surprisingly calm and appeared to avoid the casket containing his deceased wife's body. When it was his turn to say goodbye, he did so hastily and without emotion. As he left, he appeared unconcerned, saying that the casket could be closed and buried once the family was allowed to return home. When they returned, everything in the house appeared to be in the same condition as the day of the murder, except for the body on the floor. Joe asked his in-laws to accompany him to the scene of the crime, and they agreed, thinking he needed their emotional support. However, as they walked around the room where Rachel had been murdered, Joe began to speculate about the killer's actions. He graphically described the attack, pointing to dried blood spatters and reenacting the blows with his arms. Joe suggested that the perpetrator might have washed his hands and the crime weapon in the bathroom before taking it with him. Although his detailed and unsettling account seemed like an attempt to process his grief, his parents-in-law couldn't shake the feeling that he was reenacting the crime. Rose, in particular, secretly suspected that Joe might have been the one who killed their daughter. Immediately following the funeral, Joe began aggressively seeking media attention. He granted numerous interviews and even invited reporters into his home, providing them with a tour of the crime scene while recounting the events that transpired. 3 weeks after the tragedy, the Rachel loved ones agreed to participate in a television program about the crime. However, while Rachel's parents appeared to be overcome with grief, Joe's behavior on set was remarkably different. He interacted with the makeup team, showing concern for his on-camera appearance, and during breaks, he eagerly accepted and enjoyed the offered snacks and coffee, behaving more like a celebrity than a grieving family member. The police, who were still looking at Joe, decided to follow him and found that from the set he went straight to his mistress Nikki, who spent the night. By that time, the last doubts that he was the killer had already been dispelled, and it remained only to collect irrefutable evidence for the court. Collecting evidence proved to be a time-consuming and challenging task. The main piece of evidence, the murder weapon, remained elusive. Despite this, investigators accumulated enough supplementary evidence. Initially, 2 key witnesses, Nikki and Joe's colleague who corroborated his alibi, faced possible imprisonment for perjury, leading them to recant their earlier statements. Nikki revealed that her relationship with Joe never actually ended, they continued to see each other in secret. Rachel, who discovered their ongoing connection, got into a significant argument with Joe and his wife shortly before the tragedy. In contrast, Joe's colleague, although previously vouching for his whereabouts, could not confidently attest that Joe was at the bus station across town at the time of his wife's murder. He unknowingly corroborated his friend's story at his request, unaware that Joe was a suspect in the crime at the time. Emails retrieved from Joe's computer, in which he made disparaging comments about his wife and planned a future with his mistress and children, were also submitted as evidence in the case. Joe made a deliberate attempt to create an alibi by going to the gym and ensuring he was caught on camera. He then informed his colleagues that he would be unavailable due to a work commitment in another part of the city. However, instead of going to the bus station as claimed, Joe went home, armed himself with a dumbbell, and hid in the bedroom, waiting for his wife to return from taking the children to kindergarten. He launched a surprise attack on her from behind, leaving her no opportunity to defend herself. After committing the crime, Joe, who later admitted his actions, cleaned the blood from himself and the murder weapon in the bathroom next to the bedroom. He then changed his clothes, scattered his belongings around the house to make it appear like a robbery had occurred, and headed to work. While on his way to the office, Joe got rid of the items he had taken, disposed of the bloody clothes and dumbbells, and made several attempts to cover his tracks by calling his wife's phone, sending her messages, and leaving voicemails asking her to call him back. At the office, Joe exhibited unusual behavior, appearing overly excited and showing signs of nervousness, as evident from his slightly shaking hands. Some of his colleagues noticed his unusual behavior and asked if he was okay, but Joe seemed flustered and, instead of responding, quickly retreated to his office. Shortly after, he received a call from the daycare center informing him that no one had picked up their boys. Instead of rushing home, Joe sent his mother-in-law to discover his daughter's disfigured body first. He believed he had covered his tracks and that his guilt would be impossible to prove. However, his desire for fame and public attention ultimately worked against him. Although most of the evidence against Joe was circumstantial, he was not arrested until 2 years after the crime. His guilt was ultimately proven by tracing his movements on the day of the murder, using data from a cell phone he had kept with him. Notably, at the time of the murder, Joe's cell phone signal was tracked to the home, a fact later confirmed by phone records. Furthermore, it was revealed during the trial that the anonymous letter sent to Child Protective Services, which made false accusations against Rachel, was actually written by Joe's mother at his request. Joe's motive for the murder was to gain sole custody of the children in the event of a divorce. To achieve this, he attempted to discredit Rachel by portraying her as an abusive mother. However, social services found no evidence to support these claims, and Joe decided to take more drastic action. Joe showed no remorse in the courtroom, smiling and chatting with his lawyers as if he was confident he would be acquitted. However, in the summer of 2007, the court delivered a guilty verdict and sentenced him to life in prison. Despite the defense team's efforts to appeal the decision, all their attempts were unsuccessful. Interestingly, Joe's relationship with his mistress, Nikki, continued even after his imprisonment. She visited him regularly for many years, but they suddenly lost contact in 2022. Throughout his imprisonment, Joe has maintained his innocence and has been a model inmate, never causing any trouble. He hopes that this good behavior will eventually make him eligible for parole. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan grew up in Canada, in a large family with his parents, Bill and Susan. Bill works at the Toronto Star daily newspaper and spends time on his many interests, including sports, yoga, and psychology, which help balance family life. In addition, his wife, Susan, is able to manage the household, take care of the children, and keep their Toronto home clean. Passers-by often stop to admire the family's beautiful and blooming garden. Although Susan loved her sons equally, but Brett seemed to be less criticized because he was generally well-behaved. Brett was very clever at getting out of difficult situations, which gave the impression that he was a good boy, although this was not always the case. Brett was extremely popular in school, with everyone wanting to be his friend or at least be able to greet him by name, just like his older brothers. After high school, Brett attended university, driven by a desire to surpass his brother's achievements. To earn extra money, he placed an ad in the local newspaper, offering to paint houses and fences for Toronto residents. At first, His business was quite successful and Brett felt proud, especially with his first income. His mother, Susan, was thrilled and often cited him as a role model for others. However, things took a turn when Brett dropped out of college to focus full-time on his paint business. Without a degree, he had to work full-time as a paint salesman, which deprived him of formal education and exposed him to paint fumes on a regular basis. For a while, Brett felt confident and superior to his brothers, but this soon changed. After a couple of years, his brothers, Christopher and Leland, graduated and landed jobs in their specialized fields. Christopher worked for the Toronto Transit Commission, and Leland became the family artist and designer. As they established their careers and moved out of their parents' home, Brett's power began to diminish significantly. To save money on rent, Brett continued to live with his parents and younger brother, who attended a school for gifted children. Brett's financial situation grew more dire over time. By 2007, when he turned 26, his debt had surged to more than $60,000. This burden led to depression, but despite his inner turmoil, Brett maintained a cheerful exterior, always willing to lend a helping hand and participate in volunteer work. His friends and acquaintances were unaware of the immense emotional pain he was hiding. Brett faced a severe situation on October 28, 2007. With winter approaching, he had no orders. Left with no other choice, Brett wore his oldest clothes, including a hat, a long sweater his brother had given him and a long scarf his mother had knitted. It was the first time he had worn the scarf, but it was finally coming in handy. He wrapped it around his face, leaving only a narrow slit for his eyes, and headed for the bank that was on the outskirts of his neighborhood. Brett stood in line at the bank, holding a thick folder and favoring his right foot as he waited his turn. When the bank employee called him forward, he approached her and spoke in a hushed tone. He calmly informed her that he had a gun and urged her to remove all the cash from the register and hand it over to him. He warned her that if she didn't comply, he would start shooting, and she would be the first person he would harm. She with trembling hands handed him all the cash from the register. Brett quietly exited the building, careful not to draw the attention of the guardians. Once outside, Brett took off running. He counted the money he had stolen from the bank, but it wasn't much, just over $1,000. To pay off his debt, he calculated that he would need to rob about 60 more banks, a crazy idea, but to him it seemed like the only option. For the first few days, Brett was fearful that the police would somehow catch up with him, so he avoided going home. He told his mother he had a job in a neighboring town and spent his nights sleeping in his car. Periodically, Brett would sneak back to his house to check if there were any police cars staking out the area. Finding none, he felt reassured that he was in the clear. The first robbery was followed by a second, then a third, and a fourth. Each time, Brett changed his clothes, opting for second-hand or discarded items he found in the trash. He would burn the used clothes after each crime. Brett also bought a beard from a costume party store to further disguise himself. Brett committed a string of bank robberies in the Toronto area, and his distinctive beard made a lasting impression on the witnesses. His total intended theft across all instances never exceeded $3,000. Brett's luck ran out when police spotted his car on surveillance cameras and followed him home. They tracked his exact route, gathering details from various vehicles to prove his guilt. Further inquiries yielded little new information, so the authorities closely tracked a particular road in an attempt to shed light on the case. Their patience and hard work finally paid off. They found a potential lead. This person of interest, a bearded man, was found walking alone near a bank and was promptly detained by the officer for further investigation. Brett was under investigation for 7 months before being charged with robbery with a firearm, despite having a gun permit. Notably, he never actually carried a gun or any other weapon during the robberies. He didn't even bring a kitchen knife. Initially, He was charged with 19 counts, but after multiple appeals filed by him and his family, only 8 of those counts were upheld. Upon being given the opportunity to apply for parole, Brett submitted a petition. In it, he asked the authorities to consider the circumstances that led him to commit the crimes, including severe depression caused by 2 failed relationships and a significant amount of debt. He also reiterated that he had never intended to harm anyone during the robberies, as evidenced by his lack of weapons. His remarks were taken into account, but as a condition of his potential parole, he was required to undergo a session with a psychologist. The sessions had a positive impact on Brett. During his time in prison, he had lost touch with his family, but he took the initiative to reconnect with them. The positive changes in Brett were noticed by the commissioners, and on November 24, 2010, he was released from prison. However, the freedom he had fought so hard for turned out to be more challenging than he had anticipated. Prior to his career as a painter, Brett struggled with deep emotional pain that weighed heavily on him. He had previously been a bank robber and served time in prison, which damaged his reputation. As a result, no company would hire him, and even those who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they discovered his true identity. The neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and visited frequently, now spread unpleasant rumors about the family. The Brett family quickly sold their house and relocated to Scarborough. Susan started a new garden, and Brett found a job with a trading company. Although the pay was low, his parents helped him financially to rebuild his life and continue his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist, who consistently advised him to maintain a strong connection with his family. Brett's life took a turn for the better when he met Kristen Baxter in September 2011. Kristen was an amazing person who had her own apartment with a stunning sea view. She was also into sports, which helped her stay in shape. What Brett appreciated most about her was that she didn't care about his past. They enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son in a happy relationship and were confident that Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential. However, just when everything was going well, tragedy struck. Brett's father passed away, leaving him in shock and sending him into a depressive state. As a result, Brett started visiting his psychologist more frequently to cope with his emotions. Brett was juggling 2 responsibilities: supporting his mother financially and nurturing his relationship with Kristen. They were both young adults, eager to build a stronger and more significant relationship with each other. Brett fell deeply in love with Kristen and decided to carry out an important plan. He had some savings and, after discussing his plans with his mother, decided to propose to Kristen with a ring. His mother supported his decision and gave him money to buy a ring. Although Kristen didn't need an expensive gift, Brett chose a gold ring with a large diamond to make the proposal special. Kristen happily accepted his proposal. As they began planning their wedding, Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was worried about the high costs and how they would affect his job. Brett found a job opening at a large technology company on the internet and applied for it. He updated his resume and submitted it, and was even invited for an interview, which he successfully passed. As a result, he was offered the job and was thrilled. He eagerly shared the news with his fiancée and mother, and asked them for money to buy an expensive suit for work. His mother agreed to help him, and he purchased the suit. However, just as Brett was about to start his new job, the company called him to inform him that they had to withdraw their offer. The security department had discovered his past criminal record, and the company could no longer hire him. This news was devastating for Brett, and his mood plummeted. He felt like giving up on his job search and education, wondering why he was wasting his time applying for jobs that he would never get due to his past mistakes. He decided that it would be better to use the money his mother and brothers had given him for something else. Brett had dropped out of university, but he didn't tell his family or his counselor. To maintain the illusion of success, Brett would wear a suit and tie, then change into casual clothes on the way to his job as a house painter. He would tell his relatives that he worked in an office. To further deceive his loved ones, Brett would post fake photos on social media, pretending to be at work or attending business events. He would also fake phone calls, making it seem like he was busy with work-related issues. Brett's family had no idea that he was hiding the truth about his life. As Brett's wedding to Kristen approached in September 2016, his deception reached new heights. He rented an expensive restaurant for the reception, which cost $100 per guest. His family was thrilled, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around with a prestigious job and a beautiful fiancée. However, Brett's deceptions became so overwhelming that he could no longer control his lies. Brett's wedding was just a month away, and he was struggling to cover the costs. He had been borrowing money from his mother, but when she could no longer help him, he pressured her to find a higher-paying job. Meanwhile, he was planning a bachelor party and had invited all his friends and brothers. Brett had a secret. He had been lying to his family for a year about working as an engineer for a technology company. When he finally confessed to his counselor, the counselor advised him to come clean to his mother. After much procrastination, Brett told his mother the truth, which devastated her. She bragged to everyone about her son's success. Brett's mother demanded that he tell his fiancée, Kristen, the truth, threatening to do so herself if he didn't. She also warned him that his brothers were aware of the situation and were on her side. However, Brett couldn't bring himself to confess to Kristen, despite knowing that the wedding was unlikely to happen due to his deception. With less than a month to go before the wedding, Brett remained silent, knowing that Kristen deserved to know the truth before it was too late. Brett was anxious about his mother revealing a potentially scandalous secret to his fiancée, Kristen. Every time her phone rang, he would tense up, holding his breath until he realized it wasn't his mother on the line, but rather one of Kristen's friends inquiring about her wedding plans. Eventually, Brett came up with a plan to silence his mother for good. As a convicted felon, Brett was prohibited from owning firearms. He decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon, to carry out his plan. Interestingly, his late father had taught him how to shoot a crossbow at targets in their garden, a hobby that Brett had excelled at. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows at a local sporting goods store and hid them in his garage, disguising them among construction debris. He also created a fake alibi by rigging his computer to automatically post pre-written comments on YouTube. He achieved this by attaching a spoon to a fan, which was connected to his computer. The fan was set to a timer, making it seem like Brett was actively using his computer at the time of the crime. Brett made everyone believe that he spent the whole day at home, watching videos and commenting on them. However, on the morning of August 25th, he had other plans. He put on disguising clothes that concealed his face, sneaked out of the house through the back door to avoid the security cameras, and took a train to his parents' house. He wants to eliminate anyone who might stand in the way of the peaceful life he and Kristen are building. When Brett arrived at his parents' house, his mother, Susan, was taken aback by his unexpected visit. She wasn't feeling well that day, but Brett persisted in persuading her not to reveal his plans to his future wife. Despite her poor health, Susan firmly refused to comply with Brett's demands. As he continued to pressure her, Brett's anger escalated, and Susan sensed that something was terribly wrong. She noticed the crazed look in her son's eyes and warned him that she had already called for help and that Christopher was on his way. Brett's anger reached a boiling point. He rushed to the garage, grabbed a crossbow, but his rage and adrenaline surge made him unable to aim properly. Instead, he used the crossbow's butt to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he tightened a rope around her neck. After covering her body with plastic bags, Brett loaded the crossbow with arrows, ready to face whoever was coming next. Brett's brother Christopher was lured into a trap by the suspect. As he entered the garage or the yard, Brett, who was hiding in the bushes, ambushed and shot Christopher in the neck. Christopher died shortly after the attack. Alexander, the youngest brother, was the next target. The suspect had also managed to lure him, but Alexander's outcome was different. Shot in the neck with an arrow, Alexander was critically injured but didn't die instantly. He screamed and cried for help as the attack took place. Throughout this violence, Leland remained asleep on the second floor, oblivious to the crime happening nearby and to the identity of the perpetrator, who was also a family member. It was Alexander's screams that startled Leland out of sleep, ran downstairs, and stumbled upon the horrific scene of his brother Brett trying to strangle Alexander. A fight broke out between Leland and Brett, and Leland ended up in control, forcing Brett to back down. Leland immediately fled to a neighbor's house and called the police. With no means of escape, Brett remained in the house, realizing too late that his actions had disastrous consequences. In a desperate attempt to make amends, he composed a text message to Kristen, pleading for her forgiveness. Upon arriving at the scene, police officers found Brett, covered in blood, sitting beside his critically injured brother Alexander, who would later succumb to his injuries in the hospital. Brett voluntarily surrendered to the authorities, requesting to be handcuffed and taken into custody. During his confession, he revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden beneath packages in the garage, and acknowledged that she was beyond help. Brett admitted at the police station during the trial that he had not intended to kill Susan, but rather to scare her. In contrast, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, who were witnesses to the crime. If they had not been present, they would still be alive. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his struggles with depression, but this did not lead to a more lenient sentence. Despite Brett's cooperation with the investigation and his voluntary confession, the judge imposed 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. Brett will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the incident, has refused to speak to reporters, but he is well known in Toronto as the one who narrowly escaped the carnage. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Patrick de la Cerda. Patrick de la Cerda was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, a city known for its picturesque metropolitan area. His father, Max Dira, was a native of Spain, while his mother, Patricia Ranza, was born and raised in France before moving to the United States in the 1980s, where she met and married Max. Patrick grew up in a warm family environment where he was surrounded by love, care, and mutual respect. He was a kind, intelligent, and sociable person who excelled in school and had a large circle of friends. From a young age, Patrick was very close to his parents, who prioritized his education and well-being, providing him with every opportunity to grow into a capable and responsible individual. Patrick's father was a dedicated and skilled professional in the construction industry. Although the family was not wealthy, they were considered well off by the standards of the big city. After completing high school, Patrick decided to follow in his father's footsteps and pursue a degree in construction. However, during his time at university, his parents made the difficult decision to divorce after nearly 25 years of marriage. The divorce of Patrick's parents was a quiet and peaceful one, with no scandals or disputes over property. After the separation, his mother moved to Deltona, a small town on the east coast of the state, where she eventually remarried. Patrick, on the other hand, chose to stay with his father in Miami, where they worked together in the construction industry and were highly respected. Despite the divorce, the family remained very close, and all members maintained a friendly relationship with one another. The family continued to stay in touch, regularly calling and communicating with each other. They were always willing to lend a helping hand when needed. Patrick often visited his mother in Deltona and shared with her details of his life, including his relationships and romantic interests. With his French and Spanish heritage, Patrick had grown up to be a charming and attractive young man, which helped him win over women at a relatively young age. Patrick grew up in a family that valued strong relationships, so he never sought casual flings. Instead, he dreams of finding lasting love, living peacefully, and building a lifelong family with someone special. He created a profile on a popular dating website at the suggestion of a friend, but he didn't have high hopes of actually meeting his soul mate on the dating website. One June evening in 2017, Patrick half-heartedly scrolled through profiles of women on the site. Then, he came across a photo that caught his attention, a stunning brunette with an unforgettable appearance, big, expressive eyes, and a charming smile. Patrick was immediately smitten and decided to send her a message. She replied, much to his delight, and they easily fell into a comfortable conversation. Jessica Devnani was born in 1988 in Orlando, Florida. After high school, she attended a local university where she studied banking. Following graduation, she landed a job at a bank branch in her hometown. Around that time, she met a handsome young man online. They quickly hit it off, exchanging messages and eventually phone numbers. They had long conversations every day, creating a deep emotional bond and strong trust. As their online friendship grew, they decided to meet in person. Since they lived in different parts of the state, they chose a meet-up spot roughly equidistant from each other. On their first date, Patrick knew he had found the person he had been searching for, and he didn't want to let her go. Jessica felt the same way about him. However, Jessica was slightly taken aback by their age difference. She was 4 years older than Patrick. After their date, on his way home, Patrick called his mother to tell her what happened. They had been in a long-distance relationship for months, which was becoming increasingly difficult. Due to the distance between them, they could only see each other on weekends, and even then, they had to meet at a location convenient for both of them. Usually, they will rent a cozy hotel room in a secluded spot and use the time to enjoy quality time together. However, by Sunday night, they would have to return to their respective homes, as they had work commitments on Monday mornings. In December 2017, Patrick made a significant decision. He relocated to Delton, where his mother lived, in order to be nearer to his girlfriend. He purchased a house in a quiet neighborhood and began making repairs to create a welcoming home for Jessica. Although she couldn't move right away because of work, but they made plans to get together again and have a housewarming party in early spring. They had a special celebration planned on New Year's Eve. To surprise Jessica, Patrick set up a fireworks display in the backyard, getting down on one knee to make his romantic proposal as they gazed up at the festive lights. Patrick got down on one knee, held out a box with a ring, and asked Jessica the most important question of all: would she become his wife? Overjoyed, Jessica happily agreed. Patrick had been looking for an engagement ring for a long time, but in jewelry stores there was no ring beautiful and delicate enough for the occasion. He chose the best option possible to propose before the new year, but he also had a custom ring made from a jewelry shop, designed by himself. Patrick's engagement was just 2 months old, and the wedding preparations were well underway. His choice of partner had been approved by their parents, and they was overjoyed as they prepared to start a new life together. They had plans for a grand celebration, either in Miami on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean or in France, where the groom's mother was from, on February 27, 2018. On that day, Patrick's father, Max, received a call from a courier while he was at work. The delivery man explained that Patrick's order has been delivered, but Patrick did not answer the door or answer the phone. Max was taken aback by Patrick's unexpected actions, which immediately raised his level of concern. Since Max was tied up at work and couldn't go check on Patrick, Max asked his future daughter-in-law to go instead. Patrick's father called Jessica in a panicked tone, saying he couldn't reach his son. Jessica had been trying to contact Patrick all morning, but he wasn't responding to her calls or messages. When she shared this with Patrick's father, Max, he feared the worst. Jessica immediately dropped everything and rushed to Patrick's house. When she arrived, she saw his car in the driveway, indicating he was still at home. Using her own key, she entered the yard and called out to Patrick, but there was no response. Jessica carefully opened the front door and was met with a horrific sight. Patrick was lying in a pool of blood, showing no signs of life. She quickly called emergency services, but the paramedics were unable to save Patrick and declared him dead at the scene. When the police arrived, Jessica was overcome with grief, sobbing in the backyard where Patrick had proposed to her just 2 months earlier. An officer spoke to her, and she raised her tear-filled eyes to meet his. She claimed to know who was accountable for Patrick's murder, naming her wealthy ex-boyfriend as the culprit. To comprehend this complex case and identify potential suspects, it's essential to revisit the past when Patrick first met Jessica. At that time, Jessica was in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a wealthy businessman who owned an investment fund. She met Gregory during her student years, and he was 20 years her senior. Gregory showered Jessica with expensive gifts and took her on lavish vacations, eventually winning her affection. Jessica thought she had found her soulmate, but soon she began to notice some disturbing patterns in her ex-boyfriend Gregory's behavior. He was extremely controlling, constantly monitoring her movements and interactions with others. If she had an admirer, Gregory would quickly get rid of them through threats and intimidation. Meanwhile, he kept his own life a mystery, sharing very little about himself with Jessica. Their relationship lasted nearly 8 years, during which time Gregory never introduced Jessica to his family or friends. They only spent time together or went on vacation when he wanted to, and he rarely invited her to his home. Gregory claimed he was too busy, but Jessica longed for a normal family life and children. However, every time she brought it up, Gregory would say it wasn't the right time. When Jessica tried to end the relationship, Gregory proposed to her with a ring, and she accepted. However, nothing changed. They still lived apart and only saw each other when Gregory wanted to. One day, Gregory was in a car accident and ended up in the hospital. When Jessica rushed to his side, she decided to stop by his house to pick up some things for him. That's when she encountered a woman she had never seen before. Instead of introducing herself, the stranger asked Jessica who she was. Jessica showed her the ring on her hand and that she was the landlord's fiancée. Jessica later found out that Gregory was married to someone else, Diora Sanchez Bender. Devastated, Jessica immediately broke off the relationship. However, Gregory really wanted to keep her, begging for forgiveness and promising to divorce his wife and marry Jessica in the future. Jessica eventually gave in and continued the affair, but as time went on, nothing changed, and Jessica became exhausted. Jessica changed her life and started dating someone new, Patrick, through a dating website. She then ended her relationship with Gregory and informed him that it was over. But Gregory did not give up and started to do worse things. Gregory asked Jessica to reconsider their relationship. He then became aggressive, and he resorted to threatening and harassing her. Realizing that Jessica had moved on, Gregory turned to private investigators to hack into her online accounts and find out who she was talking to. He soon discovered Patrick's identity and contact information. Then, Gregory started sending threatening messages to Patrick. Patrick received threatening messages from Gregory, Jessica's ex-boyfriend, who demanded that Patrick end his relationship with Jessica, referring to her as his fiancée. After receiving the threats, Patrick remained calm because he thought they would not come true. However, Jessica is scared because she knows Gregory's aggressive nature and that he has a large collection of weapons. She suggested breaking up with Patrick to avoid any potential harm, but Patrick refused. They decided to report the incidents to the police, providing evidence of Gregory's stalking and threats. They obtained a restraining order, which prohibited Gregory from approaching or contacting them. Additionally, Gregory was required to surrender his firearms. For a while, the situation seemed to calm down, and they thought they had finally found peace. Nevertheless, Jessica convinced Patrick to install CCTV cameras around and inside their home, fearing that Gregory might violate the restraining order. Let's go back to the events of February 27, 2018. During the initial crime scene inspection, investigators quickly ruled out robbery as a motive. Instead, they believed the murder was personally motivated, given the nature of Patrick's injuries, which suggested a deep-seated hatred. Patrick, 25 years old, had 4 gunshot wounds, 1 in the thigh, 1 in the chest, and 2 in the head. The body also showed signs of a fall from a ladder. The body was found on the floor between the front door and the stairs leading to the second floor. Investigators theorized that the killer likely snuck into the house and waited for the owner, Patrick, on the second floor. When Patrick entered the house and began to climb the stairs, the killer ambushed him, shooting him in the thigh. As Patrick rolled down the stairs, the killer followed, shooting him in the chest and then twice in the head. The murder weapon, a rare pistol, was not recovered, but several shell casings were found at the crime scene. The police found 3 casings at the scene, but a 4th one was missing. This led investigators to suspect that the killer might have taken it as a souvenir. The initial suspect was Patrick's neighbor, a U.S. Army veteran who had a history of conflict with Patrick. The veteran had been involved in combat and had suffered a severe head injury, which led to the development of a mental disorder. The veteran was skilled with firearms and had access to rare guns. In a previous incident, the veteran had mistakenly shot at his neighbor, thinking he was a burglar. After his release, the veteran continued to harass the victim, accusing him of being a spy and threatening to expose him. The investigation initially centered around the veteran with a history of mental health issues, as his unusual behavior and mindset suggested a possible motive for the crime. Although he truly hated Patrick, he still had an alibi for the time of the murder, confirmed by many witnesses. As the police looked for evidence and attempted to provoke a response from the perpetrator, it became clear that the crime was not a robbery gone. As the house was undisturbed and valuables remained untouched. The only items missing were the hard drives containing video surveillance footage, making it impossible to identify who entered and left the house that day. Furthermore, no evidence was found at the crime scene. Forensic experts were unable to find a single fingerprint, shoe print, or DNA trace, suggesting that the murder was meticulously planned and executed. Although the investigation suspected Gregory's involvement, it seemed likely that he would escape justice due to the lack of concrete evidence. The police asked Jessica to help them with a secret plan to catch her ex-boyfriend, Gregory, off guard. She agreed to make the call, and as the police had hoped, Gregory answered. Jessica tried to lure him into a conversation, but it quickly became apparent that he had anticipated the trap and was not falling for it. Gregory seemed unflappable as Jessica confronted him about Patrick's death. When she accused him directly, he acted shocked and even offered her his condolences. Despite her best efforts to get him to lose his cool, he didn't give away any incriminating information. In the end, the police didn't have enough evidence to hold or question Gregory, so he remained at large, abiding by the terms of a restraining order. He appeared to have already distanced himself from Jessica, makes gathering evidence more difficult. As the police investigation stagnated due to lack of evidence, Diora Sanchez, Gregory's wife, called to reveal she had vital information about Patrick's death. Upon arrival at the police station, Diora told investigators about discovering a cryptic notebook in Gregory's office just days before the crime occurred. Upon flipping through the notebook's pages, Diora stumbled upon an entry containing an address she didn't recognize, accompanied by a series of cryptic digits that appeared to be a code. Diora had previously ignored some suspicious sketches made by Gregory, but when she saw a news report about a young man's murder, she realized the significance of those sketches. The crime scene's layout matched the drawings Gregory had made. Deorra informed the investigators, who then obtained a search warrant for Gregory's house. Upon searching, the police found a mysterious notebook in Gregory's office, but several key pages were missing. They later discovered those pages in a trash can, carelessly discarded after being ripped out and crumpled. The pages contained a detailed plan of the crime, including turning off the victim's phone, wearing gloves, and using a special lubricant on shoes to avoid leaving footprints. The records also revealed that Gregory had been stalking the victim, Patrick, and knew his daily routine, including the time he returned home. Furthermore, Gregory knew the location of surveillance cameras in and around Patrick's house, suggesting this was a carefully planned and executed crime. In addition to committing the crime, Gregory took steps to cover his tracks by disposing of the weapon, clothes, shoes, and gloves. However, he failed to destroy his own records, which later incriminated him. Furthermore, his wife's curiosity ultimately worked against him. A shell casing was discovered in a cigar box, which was meant to be taken as a trophy by the gunman. Forensic analysis confirmed that the casing matched the one found at the crime scene. The trial of Gregory posed a challenge due to the lack of direct evidence. Although the accumulated evidence was sufficient to arrest him, it was largely circumstantial. Since the crime weapon was never recovered, there was no definitive proof that Gregory was at the victim's house on the day of the crime. Moreover, there were no eyewitnesses to testify against him. The trial, which began in May 2021, more than 3 years after the crime, was heavily influenced by the skilled lawyers Gregory hired. He appeared confident and seemed to believe he would evade punishment. A crucial witness, Jessica, provided detailed testimony about her long-term relationship with Gregory, including his marital status, her attempts to break up with him, and the subsequent harassment and threats he made against her and Patrick. Jessica presented evidence of her conversations with Gregory, including screenshots of their conversations and their phone records. However, Gregory's lawyers countered by blaming Jessica, claiming that she was responsible for Gregory's behavior. They claimed that Jessica had started a new relationship with Patrick while still involved with Gregory, and that she had hurt his self-esteem. The defense downplayed the significance of the written plans for the murder, describing them as mere fantasies of a hurt man seeking revenge on his rival. They argued that Gregory never acted on these plans and therefore did not leave any evidence at the crime scene. Additionally, the lawyers claimed that the search of Gregory's home was conducted illegally and with procedural errors, suggesting that the shell casing found there could have been planted. The crime weapon was never found, and Jessica's identification of the gun model was uncertain. She had previously seen a similar gun in her boyfriend's collection, but she wasn't familiar with firearms and could have been mistaken. The defendant's ex-wife, Deorra Sanchez, was called to testify. During her testimony, the defendant, Gregory, unexpectedly professed his love for Deorra. This declaration seemed to affect Deorra, and her testimony became unclear. Deorra claimed to have forgotten some details and ultimately stated that she doubted Gregory's capability for murder, given their long history together. Despite the defense's efforts to challenge the search of Gregory's home and the lack of direct evidence, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. Gregory was given a life sentence with no possibility of parole. As the judge read out the sentence, the defendant fixed Jessica with an intense stare, not blinking once. His glare made her feel nauseous. Jessica sat next to Patrick's mother and suddenly burst into uncontrollable sobs, finding it hard to breathe. Despite multiple attempts by Gregory's lawyers to appeal the verdict, all their efforts were unsuccessful. The case attracted public attention, with many outraged that a wealthy businessman had brutally murdered a working-class man and attempted to escape justice. Patrick's story was widely reported in the press, and Gregory remains in prison to this day. Jessica Deorra said she is grateful that justice has been served. and Patrick's memory will always live on in her. She wears the engagement ring he gave her and a special piece of jewelry he had intended to give her but never got the chance. Jessica remains close to Patrick's parents, who have welcomed her into their family as one of their own. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Wang Nan. Wang Nan, born in 1987 in Nanjing, China, a major city and former capital, Wang Nan grew up in a relatively affluent family. Her parents provided her with the best possible education and encouraged her to develop her talents. After completing her secondary education, Wang Nan enrolled in a prestigious university, where she studied business and finance, and also learned several foreign languages. Upon graduation, she landed a job at a large travel agency, where she quickly proved herself to be a valuable, responsible, and motivated employee. Her career advanced rapidly, and she was soon sent to Thailand to head a new branch and oversee its development. Wang Nan worked as a top manager for several years before deciding to leave the agency to start her own business. She opened a Chinese restaurant in Bangkok, which she managed successfully, and it eventually grew into a small but popular chain. Wang Nan was a thriving young entrepreneur who had devoted her life to her career. With her constant business engagements, she barely had time for socializing or dating, and her loneliness became a normal part of her life. At almost 30 years old, Wang Nan was well established in Thailand, having lived there for a while and become proficient in the language. However, she strived for further improvement, taking additional courses to learn Thai at a training center. There, she met a young man named Yu Xiaodong, who initially stared at her before introducing himself in his native language. They exchanged brief conversations, and he inquired about her reason for studying the language. Wang Nan replied that it was for business purposes, and Yu Xiaodong proposed exchanging business cards to potentially meet up Sunday. Although Wang Nan was not interested in continuing the conversation, she still politely gave him her business card. Yu Xiaodong also gave Wang Nan his own business card, which said that he worked in the import-export industry in Bangkok. Not very impressed, Wang Nan put the business card in her wallet and forgot about it. Yu Xiaodong was the only one who showed genuine interest in Wang Nan, and he wasted no time in calling her the very next day. However, she was preoccupied with work and couldn't spare even a few minutes to talk, so she declined his invitation to meet for coffee. A few days later, Yu Xiaodong asked her out again, but Wang Nan turned him down once more, citing her busy schedule and preparations for an upcoming business conference where she hoped to expand her professional network. Undeterred, Yu Xiaodong showed up at the conference with a stunning bouquet of flowers and waited for Wang Nan to become available. When she was free, he approached her and asked her out once more. This time, Wang Nan was charmed by his persistence, which was a new experience for her. No one had ever pursued her so relentlessly before, so she agreed to meet him for dinner. As it turned out, Yu Xiaodong's interest in Wang Nan was more than just a passing infatuation. He was completely smitten. He showered her with attention, surprise gifts, and romantic gestures, including sending flowers to her doorstep every morning with sweet notes attached. He also called her at least twice a day to wish her good morning and good night. Wang Nan had mixed emotions about the situation. While she was irritated by Yu Xiaodong's all-consuming infatuation, she was also flattered that someone was making such an effort to win her heart. As a result, she found herself unexpectedly entering into a romantic relationship. Yu Xiaodong went out of his way to woo her, not only romantically but also by trying to be perfect in every aspect of their relationship. He shared her interests and opinions, learned to cook her favorite meals, and planned exciting activities for them to enjoy together. He was also eager to help her with her work and household chores at a moment's notice. Wang Nan was over the moon with happiness. Feeling as though she was living in a fairy tale. Yu Xiaodong's behavior, however, was moving at a breakneck pace. Despite having only been together for a few months, he was already making plans for their wedding and discussing potential names for their future children. This made Wang Nan uncomfortable, but Yu Xiaodong would counter by pointing out that they were both in their 30s and that it was time for them to start thinking about building a family. That night, Yu Xiaodong wrote a heartfelt letter to Wang Nan, expressing his deep affection and commitment to being a good husband and father. The next morning, he arrived at her doorstep with a bouquet of flowers, reiterating his seriousness about marrying her. Wang Nan jokingly mentioned that the courthouse wouldn't open for another hour and a half, but Yu Xiaodong suggested they go there immediately. To her surprise, the courthouse was open, and the officer responsible for registering marriages was already at his desk, ready to formalize their union. Yu Xiaodong had secretly arranged for a hasty marriage ceremony to take place early in the morning. The whole event was unusual and lacking in formality. There were no guests, no exchange of rings, no wedding dress or veil, and no commemorative photographs. Wang Man couldn't shake the feeling that the whole thing wasn't really happening, especially since she hadn't even introduced her new husband to her mother, with whom she was extremely close. Before she knew it, she was holding a marriage certificate in her hand, and her newlywed husband was standing beside her, beaming with satisfaction. Wang Man's marriage was troubled from the start. She had second thoughts about marrying Yu Xiaodong almost immediately after the wedding. Initially, she had hoped he would be a reliable partner, a man she could depend on. Unfortunately, her expectations were not met, and her new husband's true nature soon revealed itself. Yu Xiaodong spent most of his time at home playing video games, using his wife's money without contributing to their household expenses. Whenever his wife asked him why he wasn't working, he claimed his business was slow due to seasonal fluctuations and that he was just taking a break. However, her suspicions grew as time passed, and she decided to investigate his business. Her findings shocked her. His supposedly successful import-export company existed only on paper and business cards. Wang Man was horrified, realizing too late that she should have had a prenuptial agreement. Now, her husband could freely spend her earnings, and if they divorced, he would claim her assets. During a tense conversation, Yu Xiaodong broke down in tears, promising to turn his life around and find a good job. However, it soon became apparent that he had no intention of looking for work and was content to rely on his wife's support. Yu Xiaodong, a grown man, consistently acted like a child. He spent most of his time playing computer games and expected his wife, Wang Nan, to pay for his personal expenses whenever he helped out around the house or assisted her at the restaurant. Wang Nan eventually had enough and told him she would no longer give him money unless he got a job. The next day, Yu Xiaodong disappeared, taking their marriage certificate and Wang Nan's identity card with him. Wang Nan only discovered the missing documents that evening when her accountant called to inquire about a large transfer of funds from her account. She was shocked, as she had not authorized the transfer. However, she immediately suspected her husband's involvement. It turned out that Yu Xiaodong had transferred more than $500,000 into his own account, using the stolen documents to deceive the bank into thinking it was their joint decision to transfer their shared money. Wang Nan quickly reported the theft to the police, who tracked down Yu Xiaodong a few hours later as he attempted to withdraw some of the stolen money. Confronted by the police and his wife, Xiaodong broke down and begged for forgiveness on his knees. He confessed to losing a large sum of money through gambling, which had led to threats of death and demands to repay the debt. This was not his first brush with the law, as he had previously served an 8-year prison sentence for robbery in his home country of China. Wang Man was consumed by shame as she learned the truth about her husband's past. Despite this, she believed that his addiction to gambling was a disease that could be overcome, and she wanted to help him recover and return to a normal life. To support him, Wang Nan agreed to pay off half of his debt and offered him a job as heater of one of her restaurants. Initially, Yu Yu Xiaodong appeared to be grateful for the opportunity and took his new role seriously. He even developed a promising strategy for the restaurant's growth. However, his enthusiasm was short-lived. Before long, he began to spend more time playing computer games and indulging in other leisure activities. Meanwhile, one man discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with her husband. Yu Xiaodong initially expressed reservations about the pregnancy, and in a moment of hesitation, asked his wife to consider an abortion, which she flatly refused. The disagreement escalated to the point where he threatened divorce and division of their property, but eventually, his demeanor softened, and he apologized for his rash words. Yu Xiaodong later admitted that his outburst was driven by emotional anxiety, but ultimately, he was happy about the impending arrival of their child. However, things took a dramatic turn 2 months later. During a fateful trip, Yu Xiaodong suggested that his wife purchase life insurance, citing the pregnancy as a reason to safeguard her well-being and that of their unborn child in the event of any unforeseen circumstances. This seemingly caring gesture came after a period of harmony in their marriage, where he had been attentive, supportive, and diligent in his role as a husband and expectant father. Wan Nan quickly agreed to her husband's suggestion and even wondered why she hadn't thought of it herself. They purchased insurance the very next day. A couple of weeks later, Yu Xiaodong proposed a vacation to help them relax and unwind. Wan Man was initially hesitant, but her husband was insistent. He pointed out that they had never had a honeymoon and that traveling with a baby would be difficult in the coming years. He also felt that they needed a break to clear their minds of the stress and negativity they had been experiencing. One man was eventually won over by her husband's arguments and agreed to the trip. He took charge of planning the entire vacation, choosing the destination, booking the hotel, and organizing activities that would be enjoyable and educational, yet not too strenuous for Wang Nan's pregnant state. Wang Man was happy to leave the planning to her husband and was pleased to see how much effort he was putting into making their vacation special. On June 7th, they visited the park for the first time and spent most of the day exploring its many beautiful sights and lookouts. However, as the summer evening wore on, the park became increasingly crowded, with tourists everywhere. As the sun began to set, Wang Nan noticed that her husband, Yu Xiaodong, was growing angry and nervous. When she asked him what was wrong, he explained that the crowds were ruining their chance to enjoy a romantic sunset in peace. Despite his initial frustration, Yu Xiaodong tried to make the most of the situation, suggesting that they could still have a romantic moment as the sun set. As the park began to clear out, he climbed the fence of the observation deck and called out to his wife, Wan Nan, to join him, promising her an incredible view. However, Wang declined, citing the darkness and potential danger. Yu Xiaodong became angry but eventually returned to his wife, suggesting that they should come back to the park another time to watch the sunrise together. The Wang Nan and Yu Xiaodong returned to their hotel late on Saturday night, so they decided to sleep in and head back to the reserve early on Sunday morning. As planned, they woke up at 3 a.m. on June 9th and left for the national park while it was still dark outside. Their goal was to catch the first rays of the rising sun. When they arrived, they found the park nearly empty, with hardly any other visitors. They watched the sunrise together on an observation deck. Then, Yu Xiaodong encouraged his wife, Wan Nan, to join him at the cliff's edge to see some ancient rock paintings. Initially hesitant, Wan Nan trusted her husband's assurance that he would help her climb down and back up safely. As they took in the breathtaking view, Yu Xiaodong suddenly asked Wan Nan if she regretted anything in life. She replied that she did not. However, in a shocking turn of events, Yu Xiaodong's demeanor changed. He touched his wife's hair, kissed her cheek, whispered "die" in her ear, and then pushed her off the cliff. To avoid detection, he checked their surroundings to make sure no one had witnessed the incident. Looking down, he couldn't see where Wan Nan had fallen. and the silence indicated that there were no witnesses below. Yu Xiaodong calmly walked towards the park exit, planning to report the incident after his wife was surely dead. However, hikers who had wandered off the trail spotted Wang Nan's body on the rocks and immediately called for rescue, reporting the incident. As Yu Xiaodong was leaving the reserve, several emergency vehicles sped past him, sirens blaring. Realizing what was happening, he quickly returned to the scene, pretending to be distressed. There, he put on a convincing performance, crying and begging for help. Convinced that his wife was dead and no one would discover the truth, he remained unaware that Wang Nan's fall had been broken by tree branches, which reduced her speed before she landed on bushes and then rolled onto the rocks. This series of events cushioned the impact, saving her life and that of their child, although she suffered severe injuries. Yu Xiaodong was overcome with grief, crying and lamenting the loss of his wife and child. However, his wife suddenly regained consciousness and attempted to speak, but was unable to. The people around her noticed the genuine horror on Yu Xiaodong's face, but he quickly composed himself and leaned in close to his wife. In a hushed tone, he warned her in Chinese to remain silent if she wanted to survive. Wang Nan's injuries were severe, including head trauma, multiple fractures, lacerations, soft tissue contusions, ruptured internal organs, and massive blood loss. Her spine was also severely damaged, leaving doctors concerned that even if she survived, she would likely be paralyzed and never walk again. One man spent several days in a coma, connected to life support machines, during which time her husband remained by her side constantly. However, despite his devoted appearance, Yu Xiaodong's intentions were sinister. Every time he was alone with his wife, he thought about how to complete the job without arousing suspicion. His actions were a ruse, hiding his true intentions behind a mask of love and devotion that he examined the devices, but couldn't find a way to quietly disable them. Wang Nan slowly regained consciousness. When she did, her husband was beside himself with fear. He stayed with her constantly, terrified that she would reveal the truth to the police at any moment. When they were alone, he threatened her again, saying he had nothing to lose. During the initial police interrogation, the Wang Nan supported her husband's claim that her fall was caused by dizziness. However, when her husband briefly left the room, Wang Nan asked the nurse to call the police again and prevent her husband from re-entering. It was then that she recounted the disturbing story of her fall, alleging that her husband had attempted to kill her. Yu Xiaodong suddenly burst into the room, shouting that his wife was delusional due to her head injury and that he would never harm her or their baby. His explanation was not believable, and he was arrested on the same day. At the hospital, he was charged with multiple crimes, including attempted murder and intimidation after her husband was taken into custody and sent to jail to await trial. Wang Nan finally felt a sense of relief. Although she still had a long and difficult recovery ahead of her, she now felt safe. Wang Nan initially held on to hope that her pregnancy could be saved, despite the severe fall. However, her medical team advised her to terminate the pregnancy due to the large amounts of painkillers and antibiotics she was receiving, as well as the multiple surgeries she underwent under general anesthesia. The doctors prioritized Wang Nan's life, warning her that the fetus was unlikely to survive the strong medications. This news came as a devastating shock to Wang Nan, but she ultimately followed the doctor's advice. During the trial, Yu Xiaodong vehemently denied any wrongdoing, sticking to his claim that the incident was an accident. He remained calm and composed in prison, hiring skilled lawyers and expressing confidence that he would either be acquitted or receive a lenient sentence. In contrast, the investigators and prosecutor were convinced that Yu Xiaodong had deliberately committed the crime. Motivated by the prospect of collecting a substantial insurance payout and inheriting his wife's fortune, which was valued at nearly $2.5 million at the time. During an interrogation, Yu Xiaodong made a shocking revelation about his motive for the heinous crime. He disclosed that he was angry with his wife for not paying off his entire debt, which had accumulated due to his gambling habit. In his mind, if his wife truly loved him, she would have cleared all his debts since she had the financial means to do so. This perceived betrayal led Yu Xiaodong to believe that his wife did not love him, and therefore, he felt justified in punishing her. After making this astonishing confession, the defendant became silent, seemingly aware that he had revealed too much. He attempted to retract his statement, claiming that he had been misunderstood. Nevertheless, his unexpected admission, combined with Wang Nan's testimony, was sufficient to secure a lengthy prison sentence. In March 2021, Yu Xiaodong was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he and his lawyers filed multiple appeals, and 6 months later, the Thai court showed unusual leniency by reducing the life sentence to 10 years in prison. Wang Nan and her family were shocked and outraged by the lenient sentence given to Yu Xiaodong, believing it would set a bad precedent and encourage others to commit similar heinous crimes. Yu Xiaodong received a sentence of 10 years for attempting to murder his pregnant Wang Nan. As of now, Yu Xiaodong is serving her 10-year sentence while Wang Nan is challenging the court's decision. Meanwhile, Yu Xiaodong is filing appeals to prove her innocence. Wang Nan has successfully restarted her business in 2023 and also established an organization that provides support to women who have been affected by domestic violence. She writes